councillors and members of the committee to South Kesteven District Council Planning Committee on the 5th of December 24. It's now 1:05. I'm Councillor Charmaine Morgan, the Chairman of Planning, and I will be chairing this meeting, and I'll be ably assisted by my Vice Chair, Councillor Penny Milnes. Just have some items of housekeeping before we start. Fire drill. We're not aware of any fire drill taking place today, so if the alarm does sound, please follow the instructions provided by our fire warden, Amy Pride, who's on the end here. You'll need to vacate the building via the nearest fire exit or the central stairwell, and the meeting place is outside at the front on St. Peter's Hill Green. And for those of you, the nearest fire exit is in that corner there. Hopefully you won't have to use it. Can everyone ensure that they have turned off their mobile phones or they are on silent? Thank you. Please be aware this meeting is being recorded and also live streamed via the public on the South Kesteven website. Can you ensure your microphones are turned off when not speaking? And please also ensure you do not place your mobile phone near a microphone to avoid any feedback. We have with us today Councillor Phil Dilks, who is the Cabinet Member for Housing and Planning. Welcome, Phil. We also have assisting us our officers. We have the Assistant Director of Planning, Emma Whittaker. We have got Adam Murray, who is our Principal Planning Officer. We have Craig Dickinson, who is a Planning Officer. And we will have joining us later Shez Brannan, and from Legal Services today I welcome Paul Weeks. Thank you. And just as a reminder, from Democratic Services we have Amy Pride, who is also our fire warden. Thank you. Public speakers and ward councillors, please be aware you will have 3 minutes to speak. You will be advised when you have 30 seconds left. You may then finish your sentence, but not another paragraph. Penny, could you please read out the list of speakers today? Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 8, application reference S230055, outline planning application, land to the north of Stamford. We have district ward councillors, Councillor Richard Cleaver, who's the adjacent ward councillor, Councillor Harish Bisnouthing, and Councillor Ria Rayside. Against, we have Laura Upson, Stephen Turnbull, Andrew Gillard, Carl Kilgren, Tom Upson. For, we have Victoria Lloyd, representing Stamford Welland Academy, Richard Baker, representing Stamford Association Football Club, and the applicant Tim Leiths from Gummer Leiths, representing the applicants. Agenda item 9, application reference S220502, land at Quarry Farm. District Ward Councillor, the adjacent Ward Councillor, Councillor Richard Cleaver. Against, Carrie Vaughan, representing the Community Campaign Group Protect Quarry Farm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Penny. We'll now go on to the main agenda. First of all, may we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have received apologies from Councillor Sarah Trotter. Thank you.
Thank you. You're obviously welcome to make your comments as you wish in the speaking point. We've got an application in front of us, and we've also got comments to make to Rutland, so we will do that, but I'm sure members are well aware of the wider application because they're interlinked. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to clarify, we are going to be looking at both of the applications, and we're very mindful that the Quarry Farm decision is actually not with us. It's actually with Rutland. That will be raised later. Thank you. Do we have any disclosures of interest? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When we do the application S23/0055, I will be not taking part because I am predetermined because I do not agree with this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I also have a disclosure of interest on behalf of the District Council with regards to agenda item 6 S241881, the Picture House Grantham, and agenda item S241655, School Lane Uffington. I make a declaration on behalf of all members that whilst it's acknowledged that the applicant is the council, this will not affect how members of the planning committee determine the applications. All members have been trained and will determine the application in accordance with their planning training and with an open mind. Any member who does not feel they're open-minded to determine the application today should make a declaration to that effect and not vote on the application. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just with regard to application S241655, that's actually within my ward, so I won't be voting on that application.
Thank you. You are able to, unless you feel that you are predetermined on that. So, okay, thank you. Councillor Bishnal Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've been advised by the monitoring officer that on application number S23055 that I should, because of my views, I should absent from taking part from the committee. But I will speak on the matter.
Thank you for notifying us. Thank you for that. We have received minutes of the meeting held in November, our last meeting. You should have all received a copy of those minutes. An issue has been raised which has led to the rewording, thank you Councillor Ellis for pointing this out, of one of the paragraphs. It hasn't actually such change in meaning, but we've made some amendments to make what was written much clearer. You should all have a copy of that amendment in front of you. I'll just check you all have that, just give you a moment. Thank you. And what I'm going to do is propose those minutes and with the amendment and seek a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Ellis. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you. I will now advise you that agenda item 4 is not an application, but in fact a performance review report. In view of time, we will move that agenda item to the end of the agenda, and we will move on to agenda item 5, which is application S232175, which is an application relating to the Low Road, Barrowby. And I'll now hand over to our Officer Adam Murray to talk us through this. Sorry, before you start, Adam, for committee members and speakers, we will wait for all speakers to be heard before we then move on to questions and debate. Thank you. Each speaker will have committee members being able to ask questions after they've spoken. So if we have any speakers, we haven't on this item, but for the rest of you to be aware, please don't run off once you've spoken, because we have an opportunity to ask you questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and then good afternoon, committee members. So this first application is a hybrid planning application for the erection of 175 dwellings with associated access, infrastructure, open space and landscaping, as well as a community facility at Low Road, Barrowby. Now, members will recall that this application was previously considered by the committee in June of this year, and as we discussed during that meeting, this site itself forms part of the allocation at Barrowby. And the scheme itself, as I say, just shows there the allocation site. And the scheme itself is part of that, delivering 175 dwellings as a full application and then an outline application which identifies land for a prospective new community facility. And the plan there, that just shows how that scheme fits in with the wider allocation and the other applications relating to it. The application was previously considered by committee, where committee resolved that it was minded to grant permissions subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. And part of the heads of terms for that Section 106 agreement was a financial contribution that was going to be payable to the County Council towards providing bus passes. During the course of the discussions and the negotiation in drafting the Section 106 agreement, the County Council have confirmed that their preference would actually be for the developers to engage directly with the bus providers rather than them receiving a financial contribution and then having to distribute it. So what is proposed is to take the financial contribution out of the heads of terms and to amend condition 19 of the schedule of conditions to require a scheme to be submitted which sets out how the developers will make available 2 free annual passes per dwelling for the first year of their occupation. So the key thing to remember here is that it's the same scheme that is being delivered in terms of the bus passes being provided. It is simply a change in the mechanism in which that is being delivered rather than a financial contribution. It's the developers that are required to do it directly with the bus operators. The scheme is unchanged in all other respects, and there's been no material change to justify re-looking at any other aspects of the scheme. So, just to take the conclusion altogether, officer assessment as the scheme remains in accordance with the development plan. There's no material considerations to indicate that permission should be withheld. So the recommendation to the committee is to authorise the Assistant Director to grant planning permission, subject to conditions and subject to the updated Section 106 heads of terms. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have no public speakers or speakers on this particular application, so therefore I will come back to the committee. Does anybody have any questions or any matter they wish to debate regarding this item? No? That's fine, okay. In that case, the recommendation is to authorise the Assistant Director of Planning to grant planning permission subject to conditions and the completion of that Section 106 agreement. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, my apologies. There's a change on this one.
No, someone needs to move it and then second it. So you can move it.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so just to make it clear, I will be moving the motion. If I could have a seconder, please. Councillor Bellamy, thank you. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Councillor Harrison, all those, any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. I'll just check any against. Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 6. We have, again, no public speakers for this item, and this is S241881. This is regarding the installation of solar photovoltaic system and associated works on the existing roof of the Picture House in the council offices in St Catherine's Road, Grantham. And I now hand over to our Planning Officer, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just trying to get this to display. There we go. Right. So the proposal is for the installation of a solar photovoltaic system to the roof of the Picture House offices on St Catherine's Road. And as the Chairman said, the SKDC are the applicants for this application. So this application is an application for prior approval, which subject to Part 14, Class J of the Permitted Development Order, and has been assessed against those regulations as being within the limitations of permitted development. So there's to show the site itself, which is the Picture House Council Offices building. As it's a prior approval, the considerations are limited solely to the design and external appearance and impact on residential occupiers through glare. So those are the two elements that the Council has the opportunity to assess the proposal on. So this is the proposed plan here. You may notice this differs slightly from the plan shown in the agenda. The local authority elected to swap the provider for the solar panels. However, the material change to the proposal is still within the limitations of the permitted development rights for prior approval. So you can see there's a section shown here which is marked in a black box that says shaded area. There were panels there that have been shifted to the south side there. The net change is 8 panels more, but it's effectively the same proposal, just slightly rearranged. There's some street photography of the front of the Picture House. And these are some photographs from the roof of the Picture House showing the parapet wall that would largely block these panels from view. So, as I said, the proposed layout has been somewhat amended with the change in solar panel supplier. However, it still satisfies the limitations of permitted development, as outlined in the GPDO. And as per those 2 points I mentioned that you can assess it on, the design and external appearance of these is considered to be acceptable. Their overall visibility is low, particularly due to being obscured by the parapet, and their glare on neighbouring occupiers would also be low as a result of that. As such, the recommendation is to approve the prior approval. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Again, we have no speakers, so this is back to the committee. Councillor Johnson.
I'm interested to know, what does this photovoltaic mean? Does it just a posh name for solar panels? Oh, thank you. Just thought I'd clarify that. I'm sure there's other people in the room who's interested in that as well.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Bushnell-Singh and then Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This will probably my repeat questions. Will it be possible for you to tell us where is these panels sourced? Are they UK or Europe produced, or are they coming from overseas?
If I can respond to that, Councillor Bisnell-Singh, that's not a material consideration, I'm afraid. That's a decision for the applicant. So this is not the appropriate place to ask those questions. Thank you.
Can I come back? Surely, Madam Chairman, we must be concerned about, because some of the solar panels that comes from the Far East are not, we are talking about the life of the solar panels, and afterwards the decommissioning of it and recycling of the panel. Because I believe the European-made or UK-made panels are far easier, better for recycling, even though they're a bit expensive, but they're far more efficient.
If I can actually answer that, it is not a relevant planning consideration. However, it is the policy of the council where we can supply panels within Europe or more locally. We do, but we cannot always do that. So that, if I can respond to that.
If I can just add to that as well, just to put a bit more context for the application, it's not an application for planning permission, it's an application under the Permitted Development Order, General Permitted Development Order 2015, to see whether or not we wish to require a planning application or give prior approval for the solar panels. We're very limited, therefore, on the scope of what we can consider today, and it's limited to the design and external appearance and the impacts on residential occupiers in relation to glint and glare. So it's those matters only that we're able to discuss today. So notwithstanding the fact that it's the applicant's choice over the location of the manufacturing of the panels, it's actually not something we can even discuss because it falls outside the scope of this particular application. So hopefully that's just clarified that for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Can I just suggest that Councillor Bisnoff Singh brings that up at an environmental committee? Because that would be the place for it, obviously not here.
Yes, thank you. I believe it has been discussed, actually. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on what we're looking at. So we haven't actually got the right drawings here, have we, in our agenda pack? And I can't see anywhere else that makes a reference to the correct drawings that are on there. So we're actually, if we're agreeing to this, we're not agreeing to the correct. You know, see my confusion there. That's all I'm worried on. I'd just like some clarification on that.
Yeah, thank you. When we come to vote on this, I think we need to clarify that we will be referring to the amended plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And Craig just put the drawing up on the screen. Sorry, it's just a change of the configuration slightly. That's all it is. But again, it doesn't affect the principle of what we're looking at. So I'm comfortable that we can still make this decision today. Thank you.
Councillor Crawford again.
Sorry, thank you. I have no issues with this, so I'm quite happy to propose. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Sorry, Patsy.
Thank you. Then Councillor Elliott.
That's precisely what I was going to do. I think this is a great step forward for the council, and I can't see that there are going to be any issues with it in terms of glare because it's not a hugely residential area, and obviously you've got the parapet that will prevent that from happening. So I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think this is very much a win-win all round. So if I can ask all those in favour of this application, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item 7, which is S241655, and this is regarding a single-storey existing porch being removed and replaced at 4 School Lane, Uffington. And if I can now hand over again to Officer Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just get the slides up. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the application is for the removal of an existing porch and the erection of a further side extension and porch to allow for greater accessibility to a dwelling on 4 School Lane, Uffington. The application is with us today as it's made on behalf of our private sector housing team. This shows the site here. It's on the corner of School Lane and Kazakh Lane. It's part of 2 pairs of post-war bungalows, and it's within the Uffington Conservation Area, so it's marked in pink and orange there. Here's the existing plans of the dwelling. As you can see on the left of the top right drawing, there's an existing porch projecting out of the side, and that's the section proposed to be removed and replaced with a slightly larger extension to allow for an internal reconfiguration. Here's a photo to show the dwelling as is. So the key issues here are the impact on neighbours' amenities, and the impact on the character and appearance of Uffington Conservation Area. So the assessment is in the report, and whilst it is within the Uffington Conservation Area, the dwelling itself is of modern construction and isn't a heritage building. The proposal itself is very minor in scope, and on the basis of its small size and limited impact, it's recommended that the committee grant the director authorisation to grant permission for this.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of our officer regarding this matter, or any comments? Anyone like to propose? Councillor Crawford?
I can't see an issue with this again. I'm quite happy to propose. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Harrison? Thank you. Just to clarify, this came to committee purely because it was an application. Normally, a matter like this would not come to committee. All those in favour, please raise your hand. So we have any abstentions? Thank you, one abstention. And that is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now have agenda item 8, which is on page 81, application reference S230055, which is an application relating to land north of Stamford. And I will hand over to our officer, Adam Murray, to do a presentation on this, on this application. We do have some late papers which have been submitted. Can I just check, have you all had an opportunity to see those papers? That's fine. If I give you 5 minutes to look at those. So we'll just have a short recess. We will now restart the meeting, and the time is 20 to 2. So this is application reference S230055, an outline planning application for Stamford North. And I'll now hand over to our officer, Adam Murray, for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an outline plan and application for the erection of up to 1,350 residential units, a two-form entry primary school, local centre, road between Ryall Road and Little Caston Road, removal of the existing noise bund, associated green infrastructure including provision of public open space, landscaping, formal and informal play areas, utilities including drainage, and associated access including potential realignment of part of Ryall Road, ancillary works and structures, and it's an application with all matters reserved. The application has been referred to committee due to being major development which requires a Section 106 agreement to secure financial contributions. So the application site itself is 200 acres of land situated to the north of the existing built-up area of Stamford. The site is bound to the west by Little Caston Road and to the east by the River Gwash, and includes Ryall Road at its eastern end, and also includes part of the former Stamford to Essendon railway line. The site also includes part of the playing pitches, parking areas and noise bund associated with Borderville Sports Centre. So just to give committee some context, we've got a Google aerial view here of Stamford. The application site itself is the land to the north here. As we'll discuss during the course of this presentation, the next item, part of the development also includes the adjacent land to the west here at Quarry Farm. The site itself, as we say, is a cross-boundary allocation for a sustainable urban extension to the north of Stamford in conjunction with that land to the west that falls within Rutland County. The Rutland County Council local plan was withdrawn from examination in 2021, so the Quarry Farm side of this development is not formally allocated. However, it is included as a draft allocation in the new emerging Rutland local plan. The current application that we're discussing is the South Kesteven side of the development, which is formally allocated within the South Kesteven local plan. The site allocation within the local plan is for approximately 1,300 dwellings, part of an east-west distributor road, a local centre, a primary school, and the provision of contributions towards the expansion or improvement of Stamford Welland Academy. Land that forms part of Borderville Sports Centre is included within the application. So for members' context, this is Borderville Sports Centre in the grey shaded area here. The application site includes land to the south, including the Bund and some of the training pitches to the northwest of the site as well, which was not included in the allocation boundary. Approximately half a hectare of the site, which forms the access arrangements onto Little Caston Road, falls within Rutland County Council. Now, as I mentioned, the application has been submitted and outlined with all matters reserved, and a parameters plan has been submitted which shows how the site could accommodate the development and has formed the basis on which the application has been assessed as part of the environmental impact assessment. The parameters plan shows a corridor of deviation for the proposed east-west link road, which is marked by the two black lines that run through the middle of the site. And the proposed Valley Park is marked in green that runs east-west across the site as well, and then would include the proposed parkland to the east of the Ryle Road. The school is identified by a star on the western side of the site, and that is proposed to be a two-form entry primary school with playing field. The hatched area, the pink and green hatched area, is an area identified for the rearrangement of Borderville Sports Centre, and the purple area next to that is a local centre that would include 3,000 square metres of floor space and land made available for a new health centre. Additional points of pedestrian and cycle access are included along the southern boundary of the site, and that includes identification of a proposed active travel corridor linking the site to Stamford Town Centre. Areas marked in yellow are proposed to have development limited to up to 2 stories, so that is identified predominantly along the southern boundary of the site. The area in lighter pink is where development would be up to a maximum of 2.5 stories, and areas in darker pink is up to a maximum of 3 stories. And as I say, the application also includes the potential realignment of Ryle Road, and a limit of deviation is shown by the black line in the parameters plan. We have now also received a joint illustrative master plan that's been submitted on behalf of the Stamford North applicants and the Quarry Farm applicants to demonstrate how the two sites could be coordinated to deliver a comprehensive scheme. Key things to note on this plan, members, is the continuation of the proposed east-west link road through to the Quarry Farm site, including alignment on the point of connection onto Little Caston Road in the southwestern corner of the current application site. And it also demonstrates how the proposed Valley Park as part of the current application would link into proposals for a green walking route across the entirety of the site, linking to the proposed country park identified for the Quarry Farm development. In terms of the key issues for the current application, as I say, so the application has been submitted in outline with all matters reserved. So for committee today, we are considering the impacts of the development as a matter of principle. Matters relating to the detailed design of the scheme are to be assessed as part of future reserved matters applications. Now, there are a number of key matters which have been raised as part of the current application and have formed the basis of a number of public representations on the application. That includes the principle of development, open space provision and impacts, noise and lighting impacts, access and highways, and infrastructure to support the development. So taking each of those in turn, in terms of the principle of development, the principle of development on the site has been established by the site's allocation within the adopted local plan. The allocation itself is a key part of the local plan spatial strategy and provides a substantial amount of housing towards the council's overall housing requirement. The local plan allocation includes a number of development principles, and the officer assessment set out within the report is that the application is consistent with those principles. And likewise, Stamford Neighbourhood Plan has a series of development principles related to detail design, and they would be a key part of the assessment for future reserve matters applications. In terms of open space provision, as we've mentioned, the application site does include land outside of the local plan allocation boundary that forms part of the Borderville Sports Centre. So just to give committee some indication, the clubhouse building, the 3G pitch and the stadium pitch are excluded from the current application, but the grass training pitches, the bund and the car park area do form part of the current application. Important to note for the purposes of what we're going to come on to discuss and for what is set out in the committee report is that Sport England consider all of the land in red, so the entirety of Borderville Sports Centre, to fall within their definition of a playing field, which includes land that's not currently used as playing pitches and would not be capable of being used as playing pitches. In terms of the impact of the current proposals then on open space, the parameters plan shows that part of the existing grass training pitches to the west of the sports centre and part of the car parking would be removed to allow for the formation of the proposed Valley Park. Land to the south of the stadium and 3G pitches, which includes the bund, are proposed to be developed for residential uses and part of the east-west link road. In total, the scheme would require the replacement of 1.57 hectares of pitches together with some of the existing parking areas. The parameters plan shows in hatched areas where Borderville Sports Centre could be altered or expanded, and where replacement pitches and parking can be provided as part of a reconfiguration of the sports centre. The applicant's undertaken an extensive assessment as part of the open space assessment included in the environmental statement. And the results of this assessment demonstrate that there are options for replacement pitches that would result in playing pitches of the same flexibility of use, same quantity and same quality as the existing pitches to be replaced at Borderville Sports Centre. That's included the submission of the plan that is on the screen in front of you, which demonstrates how Borderville Sports Centre could be reconfigured within the scope of the parameters plan using land assessed as part of the detailed investigations, which would achieve the same quality of pitches. In terms of the way that the inclusion of this land is assessed within the principle of development and in terms of open space, policy OS1 of our local plan is the key policy requirement. And in this case, the key criteria is criteria C, which requires equivalent or better or a replacement provision to be made within the locality. Sport England themselves, who are a statutory consultee for this application, have their own published guidance for how they consider applications affecting playing pitches. This includes identification of a number of exceptions where they will deem the loss of playing pitches to be acceptable, and in this case one of those exceptions is where replacement provision is to be made of the same quality and of the same quantity and in a suitable location. Sport England's guidance also identifies that Sport England will request conditions or measures to be secured through planning obligations to secure compliance with our identified exceptions, and that's the text identified from their policy document outlined in red here. Sport England's consultation response on the application is included in full at Appendix 2 of the report, but in short, Sport England have raised a formal objection on the basis that the scheme would result in the loss of playing fields. The proposed development would prejudice the use of the remaining playing fields of Borderville Sports Centre, and in their opinion the application does not secure replacement playing fields of equivalent or better provision in terms of quantity and quality and in a suitable location. The key thing to note with that is that part of the issue for Sport England is that they are not a signatory to a planning agreement. Ultimately, we are the planning authority, and whilst they can make recommendations and provide advice in terms of what they would like to be secured, they cannot themselves enforce that and be certain that that will be delivered because they are not the planning authority or signatory to the agreement. As set out within your report, it's our assessment as planning officers that the appropriate replacement pitches can be secured as part of the development, and that all of those concerns raised by Sport England can be overcome through planning conditions and the Section 106 agreement in line with their own published guidance. As I say, it's important to note that there's agreement between all parties about the amount of land that requires replacement, and the point of disagreement is about whether there is appropriate measures that can secure that replacement through the application. The heads of terms for the Section 106 agreement, in our review, do secure that appropriately. So the heads of terms would identify the amount of land required for playing pitches, together with additional ancillary facilities if access to the existing facilities at Borderville Sports Centre is not available. The location and details of management and maintenance of the replacement pitches to be agreed prior to the loss of any of the playing fields at Borderville Sports Centre, and a scheme required to confirm that there would be no additional costs for maintenance on users than those of the existing pitches, and the requirement that those playing pitches must be of equivalent or better quality than those to be lost, and must be available prior to the removal of any of the existing pitches. In terms of the impact on the parking areas, Condition 9 of the proposed schedule of conditions in front of you members requires details of replacement parking to be made available as part of any reserved matters application affecting the car park, and that replacement parking must be made available and ensure there's no reduction in the number of parking spaces at any time. So to summarise, it's our assessment that appropriate replacement provision for the pitches and or the ancillary facilities can be secured through the Section 106 agreement and conditions to ensure that it accords with both the local plan policy and Sport England's own guidance. What that does mean, though, is because Sport England are the statutory consultee and have raised an objection, legislation means that the local planning authority have a requirement to refer the application to the Secretary of State before granting planning permission. The Secretary of State would then have 21 days to decide whether they actually wish to call the application in, and therefore the resolution that's being presented to members is to ask for delegated authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to refer the application to the Secretary of State with the recommendation of approval, subject to condition and the completion of the necessary legal agreements. In terms of new open space, the scheme requires 6.26 hectares of informal and natural green space to meet the policy requirements. The parameters plan shows that 25 hectares of informal green space would be provided as part of the proposed Valley Park and Gwash Meadows. 3.13 hectares of additional outdoor sport space would be required, and that would be secured through new playing fields being provided as part of the primary school, which would be available for community use, and options are being explored for new additional pitches at Borderville. 2.51 hectares of other open space such as allotments, play areas and parks are required, and 3 equipped play areas and allotments and parks are all showed on the parameters plan in front of you. So in terms of how those details are secured, the informal open space and other open space are secured through detailed design as part of reserved matters, but Condition 5 of the schedule of conditions requires the reserved matters to be in accordance with the parameters plan, which shows a suitable provision being made. The Section 106 agreement, heads of terms include arrangements for 3.13 hectares of outdoor sport space, and details of the location of those spaces are to be provided as part of a programme which will need to be determined before the first reserved matters application, and if on-site provision for new sports pitches are not available, then financial contributions would need to be paid, which would then be used to enhance existing sports facilities either at Borderville Sports Centre or other sports facilities within Stamford. Turning then to noise and light impacts, as we say, the application itself proposes the removal of the existing bund at Borderville Sports Centre. The bund itself is a 6-metre landscaped bund situated on land which is 4 metres higher than the sports centre itself, and the bund was included as part of a condition for planning permission for the erection of the sports centre. In terms of the removal of the bund, Policy EN4 requires the development to demonstrate that it would not result in harm to the amenity, health or well-being, and should not have an adverse impact on existing operations. The applicant's undertaken noise and light assessments as part of the environmental statement, and that included collecting noise data over a 5-day period, covering weekday and weekend use, which is considered to be representative of normal operations at Borderville Sports Centre. And the assessments completed conclude that the scheme is capable of providing equivalent or minor betterment for the nearest residential properties. The Environmental Protection Team have been involved in the scoping of that assessment and have reviewed the modelling and the outputs, and have confirmed that they are satisfied that it is possible to remove the bund, and in principle an alternative mitigation scheme can be delivered that achieves the equivalent standards. They have required that further assessment is undertaken once the detailed design of the development is known, and their main concern at this point is how the actual removal of the bund and completion of the development and any alternative mitigation would be completed. These matters are then covered by planning conditions, so the details of the alternative mitigation will be informed by the detailed design, and therefore conditions are proposed to require detailed assessments to be undertaken as part of each reserve matters planning application. Condition 12 in your schedule of conditions specifically deals with the process of removal of the bund and subsequent implementation of any replacement mitigation, including any temporary measures that may be required during the course of that process. And then condition 28 deals specifically with validation testing to confirm the effectiveness of replacement mitigation compared to the baseline level, and for that mitigation to be retained for the lifetime of the development. Subject to the inclusion of those conditions, officers' opinion is that the scheme would not have an unacceptable adverse impact in terms of noise and lighting impacts, and does not prejudice the continued operation of Boardville Sports Centre, as well as providing appropriate conditions for future occupants of the development. Turning then to access and highways impacts, a key part of the justification for the development and for the adjacent Quarry Farm development is that they deliver an east-west link road, which would assist in alleviating traffic congestion in Stamford Town Centre by providing an alternative route. The map in front of you shows the location of the two allocations and confirmation that they would include an east-west link road. It's important to note, though, that the routing of the link road shown on this plan is illustrative only and to demonstrate that it would include a link road, and there's no policy obligation requiring the road itself to be routed to the north of the site or north of Boardville Sports Centre. Because the application is outlined with all matters reserved, the routing of the link road would be subject to determination as part of future reserve matters relating to the layout, but the parameter plan does show the corridor of deviation, which runs centrally through the site and then to the south of Boardville. That corridor of deviation then aligns with the proposed access arrangements on the Quarry Farm application, and the master plan demonstrates how the link road could be coordinated across the two sites. In terms then of the actual highways impacts of the development, the impacts of the development have been modelled using the new Stamford Transport model, which was produced in 2023, and the modelling has accounted for the combined impacts of both the Quarry Farm and Stamford North developments. Modelling has been undertaken on a worst-case scenario that assumes 0% modal shift, although the development themselves are required to provide measures that encourage sustainable modes of transport, and that modelling results have been subject to analysis and validation testing by both National Highways, Lincolnshire County Council and Rutland County Council as the local highways authorities. What that modelling shows is that development of Stamford North and Quarry Farm would generate an additional 1,000 vehicles per hour in the peak hours. A large proportion of those are identified as seeking to access the A1 rather than utilising the local highways network. The modelling also shows that approximately 300 vehicles per hour currently using the local highways network would be removed from existing junctions because they would be using the east-west link road. 17 junctions have been modelled across the entirety of the network, of which the modelling shows 12 junctions would remain below capacity with the development included. Of the 6 junctions that go over capacity, all 6 are identified as being over capacity without the development due to projected growth in traffic volumes up to 2041. And therefore, the highways authorities accept it's not reasonable to require the developer to provide mitigation at these junctions because capacity issues are not directly related to development itself. Members will note that the committee report identifies that Lincolnshire County Council have made requests for Section 106 contributions towards traffic calming measures on Arran Road, upgrading the crossing on Sydney Farm Lane and for traffic calming on Little Caston Road, Radcliffe Road and Scottgate. As set out within the report, it's the officer assessment that these contributions do not meet the legal test set out in the SIL regulations, which are that contributions must be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to the development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to development. The response provided by Lincolnshire County Council does not provide any evidence to suggest that these requirements are necessary to mitigate unacceptable impacts on safety or capacity, and that the assessment is that these measures are desirable rather than being necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. Ultimately, though, that is a matter of planning judgment, and committee are entitled to take their own view on that point. National Highways have also reviewed the modelling and have confirmed that they have no objections and have confirmed that no mitigation is required as a result of the development to the A1 junctions. As we've mentioned, the modelling has been completed on a worst-case scenario with 0% modal shift included, but the application includes a travel plan that outlines a range of active travel improvements, including proposals to enhance and extend the existing bus services to serve the site, providing mobility hubs, real-time public transport updates, and providing a dedicated active travel route to the site, from the site to Stamford Town Centre. And these contributions and improvements are to be secured through the Section 106 agreement and conditions. In terms of the East-West Link Road, the results of the modelling have been used to determine the phasing of the completion of the Link Road, and what that demonstrates is a requirement for the Link Road to be completed before the earlier of 300 occupations at Quarry Farm or the occupation of 500 dwellings at the Stamford North development. These arrangements are secured through the heads of terms for the Joint Infrastructure Agreement, which is to be signed both the Quarry Farm and Stamford North landowners, developers, and South Kesteven District Council and Rutland County Council. And that will ensure that the Link Road is completed in full, even if only one development is substantially progressed. The master plan demonstrates that the routing of the Link Road can be coordinated, and a Main Street design brief has been produced which sets out the design principles for the development of this route across both of those parcels. The Council's urban design officer has been involved in the review of this document and the preparation throughout the pre-application stage, including engagement with our design pad service and during the consideration of the application. And the design officer has confirmed that this design brief will ensure a consistent approach to the Link Road. So in terms of the legal obligations, as we've discussed, the planning application, the Section 106 heads of terms includes necessary replacement pitches as well as provision for new plain pitches. Also includes 30% affordable housing with a tenure split specifically designed to address an existing imbalance in affordable housing in Stamford, and the scheme also includes almshouses and supporting housing units to support the most vulnerable in the community. The affordable housing would be subject to a nominations agreement which prioritises applicants with a local connection to Stamford, and the scheme also includes 2% self and custom build housing. In terms of healthcare, officers have engaged with the NHS throughout the course of the application, and the Section 106 heads of terms safeguards land for a new health centre as part of the new local centre, and if the ICB elect to provide a new health centre at an alternative location in Stamford, the developer would be required to provide financial contributions towards that. In terms of highways, heads of terms include contributions towards public transport improvements and travel plan monitoring. And then turning to education, the scheme itself, as we say, includes land for a new primary school. The heads of terms identify land for 1.83 hectares to provide the primary school, and the County Council will serve notice on the developer when the school is required, at which point the developer then has the option to either build the school themselves or to confirm that the County Council would be responsible for delivery of the school in the normal way. Subject to who is responsible for building the school, financial contributions may be payable between the County Council and the developer towards the delivery of that primary school. And then financial contributions are also proposed towards expanding secondary education at Stamford Welland and to also providing a sixth form at Stamford Welland. And the heads of terms also include a monitoring fee towards South Kesteven to monitor implementation of the development throughout its lifetime. In terms of the Joint Infrastructure Planning Agreement, this deals with the cross-boundary delivery of the Link Road together with the coordination of the design of that Link Road. And as I say, that will be completed by both SKDC, Rutland County Council and the applicants and developers of both the Quarry Farm and Stamford North applications. So turning then to the planning balance, just to reiterate, the scheme itself includes a number of matters that provide significant benefit to the local community. So it delivers 1,350 new residential dwellings, 30% affordable housing, which has been designed specifically to address imbalances within Stamford, provides almshouses and supporting housing units to support the most vulnerable in our communities, and 2% of all dwellings are to be provided self-build and custom-build housing. The scheme also includes a new local centre, which includes land for a community hall and land for a new health centre. 25 hectares of new informal open space and natural green space to be provided, 3.13 hectares of new outdoor sports space, and 2.51 hectares of other sports space, including allotments, equipped play areas and parks. 25.5% net gain in habitat units and 27.82 net gain in hedgerow units. And in terms of infrastructure provision, as I say, it includes an east-west link road, contributions towards enhancing public transport, a new primary school, land for a new health centre, and contributions towards expanding Stamford Welland Academy, including funding to establish a sixth form. Undoubtedly, the development would result in a change to the character of the land from currently undeveloped land to a residential site, but that's already fundamentally been accepted through the allocation of the site within the local plan. So bringing that balance all together, it's the officer assessment that the public benefits outweigh the identified harms, and that the scheme accords with the development plan as a whole, and the material considerations in this case also weigh in favour of the development. So the recommendation being made to committee is to authorise the Assistant Director of Planning and Growth to refer the application to the Secretary of State with a resolution to grant planning permission subject to conditions and the completion of the Section 106 agreement and joint infrastructure planning agreement, and in the event the Secretary of State does not call in the application, to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning and Growth to grant planning permission subject to those conditions and the completion of the legal agreements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive cover. Thank you. We'll now move on to, we have a number of speakers, and first of all I would like to move to our district councillors. Our first speaker is Councillor Richard Cleaver, who is the adjacent ward councillor. If Councillor Cleaver would like to come forward, please. As with all speakers, you will have 3 minutes to speak. You will be given a 30-second warning. Please give us an indication when you're ready to go. And as I said, please stay put after you've spoken in case we have any questions for you. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm Richard Cleaver. I am the Lincolnshire County Councillor for Stamford West and the South Kesteven District Councillor for Stamford St John's Ward. This afternoon we're considering this application because the site was allocated for housing development in SKDC's local plan adopted by the Council's previous administration back in 2020. I'm conscious of the time limit on speakers, so I'll not address aspects of this application which I know will be covered by other speakers, but will instead concentrate on those aspects which come specifically within my remit as a county councillor. First, I'm very pleased the LCC has requested considerable sums of money to support schools, including the provision of a new primary school on the site, and £1.3 million towards the establishment of a much-needed sixth form for the town at Stamford Welland Academy. I hope that the committee will ensure that LCC's request is granted in full. Second, the traffic issues posed by this proposed development have been a focus of discussion locally for more than 5 years, and it is fair to say that it is the greatest concern of residents across the town as a whole. Accordingly, I have engaged very actively with LCC Highways and was delighted when they responded by requesting very substantial support with mitigations for the additional traffic. The developer's experts' own projections forecast that in 2041, when both Quarry Farm and Stamford North are completed, there will be 509 vehicle movements per hour in the morning peak from the new link road travelling down Little Castleton Road towards town. That's one vehicle every 7 seconds. Radcliffe Road is mentioned by LCC as it needs to have funding available if measures need to be taken to prevent it being used as a rat run by the additional motorists using it to avoid queuing at the Scottgate junction. The busiest section of Arran Road is predicted to take 400 vehicles per hour travelling towards Empingham Road in the morning peak, and Sydney Farm Lane 296 vehicles per hour travelling towards the A1. That's 5 vehicles per minute going across the zebra crossing at the A1 end of Sydney Farm Lane in just one direction at peak time when the children are crossing to go to school. To me, that justifies the crossing being upgraded to be controlled by traffic lights, as LCC has requested funding for. Let's not forget this development is going to be completed over a very long period, so we will not see any sudden increases in traffic. But LCC needs to have a pot of money to draw on to put the mitigations in as and when the need for them arises at specific locations. However, since some of this traffic will be generated by Quarry Farm, it's only fair that RCC provides some of their money from their SIL funding to turn linkages roads as well. If this application is going to be referred to the Secretary of State anyway, due to the sports pitches issue, then the Secretary of State might also be asked to determine the whole issue of highways mitigations and how they should be funded and addressed by all the interested parties, the developers, RCC, LCC and National Highways. In short, I hope the committee will not approve this application without the highways issues being appropriately addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Councillor Cleaver? Thank you. I have one for you, if I may. You mentioned that you have negotiated with Lincolnshire County Council regarding and then requesting measures to be put forward. What degree of commitment did they actually give you regarding that? Was it like it would be nice to have or essential to have?
I think their commitment is spelt out in the letter that they put forward, which is part of the agenda pack for the application, which clearly requests the things that I mentioned in my 3 minutes there. But again, particularly the upgrading of the crossing on Sydney Farm Lane, and particularly this issue that, because of the slow build-out, because the figures are for 2041, that's a long way away. And I don't think anybody, certainly not the officers at LCC, feel they can predict now exactly where any specific measure needs to be taken to mitigate the effects of that extra traffic, which is going to be considerable. The 1,000 vehicles was mentioned in the presentation by the planning officer here. We know it's going to happen. We don't know exactly how rat runs will work, how many people will use Arran Road, how many people will use Sydney Farm Lane, which are two roads that run parallel. Until we know that. We don't know that because we don't know what National Highways will or won't do on their junction. So the whole thing needs to be put together in a holistic way between RCC, LCC and National Highways so that we know it's going to work properly. I mean, that's my concern, that because we've got these different operators, this isn't a normal planning application, we've got a lot more players involved than we would have in a normal SK only. We've got a major road, the A1, involved, which is National Highways. We've got RCC across the border, and some of their roads, some of our roads, some of LCC's roads. So my concern is that we're not going to come to, unless heads are knocked together, we're not going to have an optimal solution to the highways problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll now call on our next speaker, Councillor Harish Bishnal Singh. Thank you. As again, you have 3 minutes and you will be given a 30-second warning if you want to indicate when you're ready. And again, if you just like to hold fort in case there are any questions. Thank you. I'm afraid not, because it's not fair on everybody else. Sorry. But we have a number of speakers. Do you want to start now? Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Committee. I raise the formal objections to the Stamford North and the Quarry Farm development, which poses which proposes to build 1,950 houses with this. And while we acknowledge that the need of development is essential, to highlight several serious concerns regarding the project, which, if unaddressed, will negatively impact both the current and the future residents of Stamford. Our first and foremost concern is about the removal of the bund. This bund was originally conditioned and included in the plan to protect the neighbouring inhabitants from the noise and light pollutions generated by the nearby sports stadium on match days. The absence of the acoustic bund would subject local residents to significant disruptions, and particularly in the evening on weekends when the sporting events are held. The noise from the crowd, cheers, announcements and amplified sounds, along with the intense floodlighting, will severely affect the quality of life and of the residents in the area. The second rows of houses that is proposed to be built using acoustic absorbent material will not be sufficient to provide the necessary protections from noise. The proposed material may reduce the noise to some extent, but they will not adequately provide safety and disruption for the whole populations. By the removal of the bun, actually the flood lighting will be higher than currently, and the new houses, the 2 rows of 8 houses that are going to be built, it will be significantly lower, so therefore the light pollution will continue and will disrupt the people. Moving, I wish to emphasize the importance of the integrated comprehensive master transport plan. This, as Councillor Cleaver has already touched on it, we have got the national highways and the Lincolnshire highways. My main concern, and probably many people's concerns, will be the connections to the A1. Because at the moment, the way it looks like, it's not very clear.
30 seconds.
But thanks, 30 seconds. The connectivity to the rest of Stamford for the residents will be very greatly disturbed. Another critical issue is adequate healthcare provision. We would like to have a proper GP surgery to service the northern part of the town. We are very lacking in good quality healthcare in Stamford, and many people do know about what's happening. My last point is that I would like to say the concerns of this development is there should be SKDC's policy 4A, SP4A, do mention that we must have significant support from the residents of Stamford, and it doesn't have significant support for from the community or for the residents of the area.
That's your time. Thank you very much. Thank you. Does anybody, Councillor Bashasik, if you'd just like to hold for, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Councillor Bashasik? No? Oh, Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, thank you, through you, Chair. You mentioned connections to the A1. What are the issues there? You didn't. Could you expand on that, please?
The issues there, if you take the whole sites from the Royal Road to Casterton Road, including the Quarry Farm, it hasn't got no connection to the A1, but it has to go through another estate, through Arran Road, and then access the A606 junctions. If you can imagine, every morning from the 2,000 houses that will be there, you've got 2,000 cars every morning leaving that because we've got no employment there for people just to walk to work. They all have to leave the town, leave the residence, access either the A1, either to go to Peterborough or to further afield to work. So those will be morning and evening, they'll be congested. It's already the east-west is Huffington Road is very congested every morning, every evening. So this effectively, because of the lack of a proper clear, this is a link road, has been mentioned many times, it's not going to support, it will eventually become a northern east-west bypass for it, because people will take the northern shortcut to Royal Road from Casterton Road, anybody coming from the A1. So that will be a great nuisance to the residents in here, because of the increase of traffic.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm afraid you can't. It's only committee members who may. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Harrison, did you have a question? Sorry, Councillor Harrison, did you have a question for Councillor? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Councillor Bishnowsing, you said that the bund was originally put there as a condition on a previous development.
Yes, it was put there as conditions when the Borderville sports field was being proposed to be moved from the Kettering Road to over there, to the north side of the town. And there were big concerns about people living in Bury Butway and or alongside the east side of Stamford. And that is why the bund was put up there to mitigate the noise emanated from it, and also with shielding it from the lights pollution that is there. So this was conditioned, i.e. planning conditions that was put in there when the permission was given for it. So I would say, what was good for it then, why is it not good for it now? It should stay in place.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more questions? No. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move on to our next speaker, is Councillor Rayside. Thank you. And again, you will have 3 minutes and be given a 30-second warning. Thank you. If you want to just indicate when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I'm Ria Rayside, the Ward Councillor for Stamford St George's, and this application would be sitting within my ward. So I think it quite necessary for me to provide my comments regarding the planning application that is currently under consideration. As this proposal has significant implications on our community, I believe it is essential to evaluate its merits and its challenges thoroughly. And my colleagues have previously spoken quite detailed on some of the topics, so I wouldn't cover all of them, but I'm going to give a brief overview of things that I think would be important to this application. I have 3 key topics. One would be sustainable development, infrastructure and amenities, traffic and transport. Number 1, the application should demonstrate a clear commitment to sustainable development principles, including energy efficient building standards, sustainable traffic and transport links, and preservation of local biodiversity. So hopefully the developers can ensure that these are priorities that are essential to the plans. 2, infrastructure and amenities. A project of this scale will have substantial demands on the local infrastructure. Has there been adequate provision for schooling, primary and secondary, healthcare facilities, and public transport? I think you can understand that a development of this magnitude will put significant strain, let's just say, on our healthcare system, which is currently we can say non-existent if you try to get an appointment with your GP. So I'm hoping these things are taken into consideration and as I can appreciate, it's not for the developers. I hope that these things are taken into consideration and that the NHS will come on board to make sure that these matters are addressed. Transport and traffic. Increased traffic flow is a common concern with developments of this size. How will the project address potential congestion and ensure safe and efficient transport routes for residents and for visitors? The integration of a cycle path, pedestrian walkways, and public transport options should be emphasized. Let's be serious. This is a very contentious application, and I get it. We need houses. I've spent the last more than 6 months trying to relocate 2 residents, which I've now successfully done, but it was because there was a lack of housing.
30 seconds.
Thank you. It was because there was a lack of housing. So I get it. We do need these houses for our residents. However, when we remove the bond and we put the houses, one of the main concerns at present, is that our affordable housing residents will be the ones who are going to be susceptible to the noise and the traffic and all the rest of it. So I urge the Planning Committee to scrutinise all elements put forward today and make sure that the development aligns with the best interests of Stamford and its future.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Councillor Rayside? No? Thank you. Thank you for your time. I'd now like to call our first public speaker, if she's here, Laura Upson. Thank you, Laura. We'd like to come forward. Again, you will have 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning, and if you just want to indicate when you're ready. That's right, that's fine. You can sit down, you don't have to stand, let's say. Thank you, thank you. And please don't run off because we might have questions for you. Thank you.
As a community, we are here to enforce 368 objections and the letter from Richard Buxton Solicitors that the facilities and acoustic protection at Borderville should be maintained and that the application should be refused or at a minimum deferred and an alternative layout considered. Development of land at Borderville and the acoustic bund conflicts with policies EN4 and SP4 of the SKDC local plan and policy 2 of the neighbourhood plan, given its lack of demonstrated local support and need for additional unallocated area. The developer was asked to provide alternative layout options in the environmental statement to demonstrate the need for this master plan option. This hasn't been seen, and with growth planned to the northern extent of the site, it makes no sense to put the main road on the southern boundary where it cannot serve future expansion. The application's ES lacks key information that would allow assessment of the noise impact of removal of the acoustic bund on neighbouring properties. The applicant is required by the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017 to provide such information. The risk of unacceptable noise and light pollution from this proposal conflicts with policies EN4 and DE1 of the local plan. In addition, the baseline data is insufficient as reported by Sports England as missing both nighttime noise and cumulative noise assessments from both the stadium and training pitches when in use simultaneously. The bund cannot be removed without sufficient proof that mitigation can be provided. We support Sports England's objection that there is an unacceptable risk of replacement pitches of adequate size, quality and location not being provided, as well as prejudicial impact on the operations at Borderville with houses planned in such close proximity. Borderville was granted planning permission as a replacement for Stamford AFC's pitches off Kettering Road, which was developed for housing. For this developer to seek to move at least 4 grass pitches to another location so it can do the same seems ridiculous. This facility was allocated, included in the local plan, and it should be preserved, including the noise protection afforded to existing residents as a vital pre-occupation planning condition. We agree with Sports England's statement in paragraph 193 of the NPPF seeks to ensure that existing facilities continue without restrictions placed upon them by development permitted after they were established. Borderville was purpose-built in 2014 as a sports facility with room for growth. That has been extended in recent years, so the dilution of its facilities as replacement sports grounds are moved away from site will impact students, children, sports people and community. The Football Foundation stated that separate management and maintenance arrangements secured for a satellite site would place additional operational strain on local sports operations and would not meet the quality requirement in paragraph 103 of the NPPF.
30 seconds.
Thank you. We really do maintain there was a sensitive way to develop this site and make this work for everybody, and all we ask is that for that option to be considered instead of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any committee members have any questions that they would like to ask? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. If we could please have our next guest speaker, Mr. Kesteven, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to address members of the committee. Just by way of introduction, my name is Kesteven and I'm the Secretary of Stamford Tennis Club. Could I ask members to have before them on the agenda paragraph 7.7.25, please? It's on page 116 of the agenda pack. So I want to refer to that in a moment. Thank you. Just by way of background, Stamford Tennis Club, we had an average of about 300 members over the last 5 years. We're quite an active club. We have big social arrangements. We work with disability tennis, and we are the only the only tennis club in Stamford. And we are in a fairly precarious position. The landlord, who is Stamford Endowed Schools, has written into our lease the opportunity to repossess within a period of about 15 or 16 months in any 1 year. That hasn't happened yet, but it may well happen. So we're looking to relocate. That's by way of background. In relation to our views on this development, I hope it's not controversial to say that the impact of the development should mitigate all its impacts. It should meet all the needs arising from the development. And that's, as I say, that's not controversial. That's underpinned by your own policy and by legislation. So the impacts, as far as we are concerned, and I don't think it's been properly covered in the report, there will be about 1,350 dwellings. The usual assumption on these occasions is 2.4 people per dwelling, which relates to 3,240 additional people living in Stamford within about 10 minutes walking distance from our tennis club. Now, the governing body of tennis is the Lawn and Tennis Association. They calculate that roughly 4% or so of the population is interested in playing tennis, and they want to encourage more people to play. We want to encourage more people to play. So we reckon there will be about 150 or 160 people in this development who might be interested in playing tennis. And we think it's in the public interest to allow and encourage those people to play tennis. If 150 people arrived at our tennis club tomorrow morning, we could not accommodate them. As I say, we are in a precarious position in terms of our tenure, and the maintenance of our courts is in a very poor state. We do not have the resources to continue. We are looking to relocate. So all that we are asking, and if I refer members to paragraph 7.7.25, in terms of outdoor sport provision, underpinned by policy OS1, the officers have said that the requirement is 3.13 hectares of outdoor sports space. 7.7.25 puts forward a number of alternative proposals. One is that the playing fields and outdoor sports provision would be entirely on-site. Now, if that's the case, if it emerges that that's how it happens, there are no tennis facilities provided for in this development. It's not mentioned anywhere in the application documents. So we'll have a scenario some years ahead when there will be no tennis facilities in Stamford North, but those 150 or 160 or whatever it is people will all have to come to Stamford Tennis Club if they want to play. And as I said earlier, we don't have resources to accommodate them. So all that we're asking, I don't think it's a great deal, is that if members resolve to approve this application, that they do so with a proviso, with a caveat, that whether the outdoor sports provision is provided on-site or off-site, that there is the proviso and the ability for Stamford Tennis Club to call upon some resources in order to mitigate the extra need which will occur as a result of this development.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for our speaker? No? Thank you. Thank you. If Andrew Gillard would like to come forward now, please. Thank you. And again, you will have 3 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning. Thank you. If you just want to indicate when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm representing 103 households that sit immediately behind the Borderville Sports Centre. The acoustic bund was erected for good reason and on land not allocated for housing. It was an SKDC planning condition, as we've heard, and that reason for that bund still exists today. To then replace it with a relief link road, which will significantly impact on residents who should really be continued to be protected. Not to mention the impact on any new residents along the amended Southern Edge Link Road, their homes becoming an intended noise barrier for us existing residents. The noise survey alluded to did not include the areas where we live, particularly at the western edge of the Borderville Sports Centre, and that bund plays a significant part in keeping noise and light levels at acceptable. Respectfully, a proper noise survey must be completed by the applicant and data publicised before any secure decision can be made about removing this bund. Planners in mitigation say houses between the football stadium and existing residents will reduce noise, yet they provide no detail to the proposed housing layout, and they intend removing the bund before that information is made available. In addition, you say that free bus passes will reduce traffic, yet there's no service for commuters to and from the train station, and the last bus from Peterborough currently leaves Queensgate at 6:15 p.m. Since moving to Borderville, Stamford AFC have been successful. They've increased the numbers of supporters year on year. This trend, if it continues, will bring even more road traffic and supporters with fewer parking spaces. Within walking distance, Stamford College students, neighbouring people of all ages and others from the wider community use the sports facilities and pitches constantly. The proposed resiting of pitches across the town will just add to traffic chaos. It's short-sighted when even more residents from Stamford North will not be able to walk to use these facilities. You should be seeking to grow sport access in the development, not reducing it. For the link road, no alternative layouts have been provided for committee members to consider. Developers tell us that the link road allows for a green wildlife corridor, yet this is crossed by the existing Ryle Road and other roads linking the proposed housing areas.
30 seconds.
There's a real opportunity for SKDC and others to provide much-needed Stamford Northern Relief Road that could be at the northern edge of the development, rather than the proposed link road through the middle of a huge housing estate. So I ask that councillors seek necessary base data and information from the developers for this application before any work commences, and request options for the link road placement to be produced. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, again through you, Chair. Could you please give us more information about the link road that you're making reference to, and explain exactly where that would be and how that would help?
So, from the drawings, the link road is going to actually be where the bund is. I'm not sure exactly whereabouts, but it seems to me that it's going to be aligned with the one side of the Borderville centre as it is.
Sorry to interrupt. It seems to me it would be better that you ask that question of our officer.
Yeah, somebody knows how to answer it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Did anybody else have a question? No. Thank you very much. Thank you. If Carl Kilgrave would like to come forward, please. You'll have 3 minutes if you'd just like to indicate when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Carl Kilgren, local resident and member of the Protect Quarry Farm Group. I first spoke on the topic of the traffic impact of the Stamford North development at the public inquiry where the presiding officer's view was the preferred access route to the A1 off this development would be along Sydney Farm Lane. Yet, by the nature of the proposed junction of the Link Road to the Great Casterton Road and the congested nature of Sydney Farm Lane with the A606 and A1 slip, traffic will naturally funnel along Arran Road, a residential road. Indeed, our own independent traffic modelling shows a predicted uplift of 33% in vehicles using Arran Road and 30% using Sydney Farm Lane at the morning peak. These figures mirror the developer's own predicted traffic flows. Arran Road is critical to the neighbourhood plan, providing the link in the green wheel connecting this new development with that of Exeter Fields site off the Empingham Road. Yet it's destined to become a rat run to and from the A1. Sydney Farm Lane is the only access to and from the Rutland Heights estate, and with this development, residents will become isolated at peak times by the predicted traffic flow. This would not just impact on residents, but hamper emergency vehicles' access. The lane is also part of Sustrans, a national cycleway. For these reasons, mitigation needs to be considered. The argument that these junctions will become congested anyway, and so will not be incumbent on the developer to offer mitigation, does not hold. What do we understand by the term overcapacity? If the roads and junctions are operating at 1 to 5% overcapacity, this would be manageable. But as our figures show, post-development, these routeways would be massively overloaded. Either the council has been neglectful in the past over its stewardship of the road network, or it is being neglectful now by not insisting on some form of mitigation. These routes are not simply for vehicles, but are used by a large number of children going to and from the Malcolm Sargent and Casterton schools, and it's imperative that you act to make these roads safer and to potentially save lives, young lives. Currently, there is no pedestrian crossing at either end of Arran Road, no crossing at the Casterton Road end of Sydney Farm Lane, and the zebra crossing at the Slip Road end is unsafe, as traffic often travels too fast to stop. How many of you here today know the roads and junctions that will be affected by this development, let alone have spent time watching these routes at peak times and observe the traffic build-up?
30 seconds.
The driver frustration and risks taken as they accelerate to fill a gap. I would urge you, please listen to these arguments. Do not act in ignorance and expediency, but consider the ramifications of your decisions for the future population of Stamford. You are our elected representatives, and it is your chance to make a difference and to leave a legacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask? Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned problems with certain roads, and I noticed that Links County Council Highways have asked for contributions to sort of improvement works on those roads. Are you pushing for those? Are that the sort of improvements you want, and do you agree with what they're requesting?
Yes, I am. I think it's important that we have those in place. If you think about the construction traffic that this development is going to generate, you're going to have down Sydney Farm Lane large vehicles going back and forth along that road with the undertone draft of those lorries, and you've got small children walking along that path to the Malcolm Sargent School. And I know for a fact from my own grandson, who was nearly knocked over on Arran Road when he tried to cross it. So I think it's important, and as I say, imperative, that those mitigations are put into place. And I think Links County Council should do something about it, and I implore everybody here to actually voice that to them, to put pressure on Highways Links to do something.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question? No, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Anna. Oh. Oh, sorry. If Tom Hupson would like to come forward, please.
I'm speaking on behalf of the community to fight for the acoustic bund to stay, and ask for the councillors in this room to support us and object to this part of the planning application. The developer has maintained that tall, staggered houses are their acoustic solution, so I'm here with the official planning acoustic guidelines to rebut this. This information is all from Pro-PG SD2 report, chapter Noise and New Development. Ultimately, acoustic protection requires a barrier block. This means a solid barrier that runs the entire length of the noise source with no gaps, and the taller the better. Gaps allow the sound waves to travel straight through, making it ineffective. What we have currently is a barrier block. The planned 2 rows of staggered housing cannot possibly give the same or better protection than the acoustic bund, because there are constant gaps through the houses, risking sound reverberation. In terms of materials, acoustic solutions should be dense in volume, such as the existing acoustic bund, made from boulders and rocks, covered in topsoil and topped with vegetation. 3-storey homes are planned pitchside, making their situation even worse. Acoustic research states that the taller the building, the worse the impact from noise. The only way to protect them is to have acoustic protection taller than their highest windows. Putting new houses here and saying they will be cheap/affordable isn't the solution Stamford should be giving to families looking for more affordable homes. Affordable homes should not equal compromised living, where you cannot open your windows or comfortably use your garden when the sports ground is in use. It's not just the noise of the players, it's the supporters' chants and shouts, the whistles and ball kicks, and worst of all, the swearing. This goes on daily until 10:30 at night. Who wants to try and put their children to bed under these circumstances? The bund not only provides sound and light protection, but also ensures clean air for users of the sports centre. Putting the link road with all the construction traffic alongside the pitches exposes users to breathe in all those emissions. The subsequent phase of development is earmarked directly to the north. The community believes the link road should be positioned at the northern edge of this development to serve any future expansion. The developer's reasoning for not putting the road at the north is that they don't want a break in their linear park, but their plan already includes breaks to access both sides of it. They say that the southern route is shorter, but the difference is negligible when measured. They say this option has the least carbon impact, but they will have to move both a high-pressure water main and a smaller water main that runs behind the bund, as well as remove a 300-metre-long, 10-metre-high bund made of boulders and rocks, a car park and raised railroad, all a carbon-intensive, unnecessary projects.
30 seconds.
It is a realistic risk that Borderville will have time restrictions imposed without the bund for protection, so existing houses are worse off, new houses are put in a high noise area, and users of the sports ground are expected to put up with reduced operating hours and breathing in fumes, all because the developer wants to build an extra 50 homes. Given the multiple concerns arising from the current layout, we ask the application should be refused or at minimum deferred and an alternative layout considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. We now have a speaker acting for the application. If Victoria Lloyd is here. Victoria, thank you. Representing Stamford Welland Academy. Thank you. If you want to just... Are you ready?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Victoria Lloyd, Principal at Stamford Welland Academy, which is part of the Meridian Trust. Stamford Welland is Stamford's only state secondary school and has been on a significant journey of improvement over the last decade. It has grown from a school where very few people wanted to send their children to a thriving, oversubscribed school which is held up as an example of excellent practice across Lincolnshire and beyond. The school has also grown from a capacity of 550 to 750, and our ambition is to grow further still. We are a school at the heart of our community, and our facilities are used extensively beyond the school day, at weekends and during school holidays. We believe the Stamford North development will be hugely beneficial for us as a school and for the wider community. We have aspirations to further grow and improve the school, both in terms of facilities and educational quality, but to do so we need significant financial investment. The housing development will provide us with the financial resource that we need. It will allow us to expand our existing successful 11 to 16 provision by providing us with the means to develop new specialist educational, arts and sporting facilities, many of which will be available to the wider Stamford community. There is a huge need in Stamford for affordable access to high-quality community facilities. Many people do not have the financial means to pay enhanced rates for private hire of sports and arts facilities. The financial investment into Stamford Welland from this development will allow us to meet that need. These enhanced facilities will also allow us to further enhance our curricular and extracurricular offer for Key Stage 3 and 4. The most commonly asked question I get from Stamford parents is, when will Stamford Welland have a sixth form? There is a huge appetite in Stamford for children to have the option of staying at the same school from 11 to 18. The only option for this at present is for parents to pay for them to attend Stamford Endowed School or send them out of Stamford for their secondary education. The increase in housing from this development will ensure that the school PAN will increase and a sixth form with a breadth of curriculum is potentially financially viable. Part of the financial contribution from this development is ring-fenced for sixth form provision at Stamford. For any sixth form provision at Stamford, we would work closely with Stamford New College and other local providers to ensure that our curriculum offer complements, not competes with them. This development is a huge opportunity for the people of Stamford to continue to secure outstanding state education for future generations. We have to look at the superb opportunities that this development is going to provide and embrace the potential. We simply cannot afford to say no to this development. The educational future of generations to come are reliant upon it.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? I have one for you, if I may. So, if you are lacking your sixth form at the moment, how far are your youngsters having to travel once they hit that age?
So, significant number go to Stamford College. However, for those students who perhaps want a more academic option, they're having to travel to Harrington in Oakham, Bourne Grammar, Bourne Academy. And what I would say is that there is a massive limitation. We've got a significant proportion of our children are pupil premium, so are disadvantaged. We're at nearly 50%. Many of those children they just simply can't afford the bus fare, which I think it's £950 for a bus pass for a year to get across to Harrington. Similar sort of cost to get to Bourne. So yes, there is sixth form provision at the college, and absolutely that is the right place for many of our students to go, and we would want to work with them. But there is a huge appetite, and you know the parents who come to open evenings, their biggest question is, we'd love our kids to stay with you for sixth form too.
Thank you. So I just have a follow-up and then Councillor Bellamy. If you don't have this development, are you saying that you would not get that sixth form?
I'm not saying we wouldn't, but it would be more difficult from a financial point of view.
Thank you. Councillor Bellamy.
Thank you. You mentioned sports opportunities. What sports do you specialise in? Any sports in particular, or what opportunities are you given to?
So we don't specialise in one specific sport. We are looking at the minute. We're working with the Football Foundation on a 3G AstroTurf pitch. Those of you who have worked with the Football Foundation before will know that a significant contribution is required. So they will put sort of £750,000 of the £1 million that's required, but we will need to stump up about £250,000. So whilst we've got some reserves, we're not slopping around in money as a school, as you can imagine. So actually, any sort of funding that would be generated from this development would help us secure that 3G AstroTurf. But it isn't just football, it's across the board.
Councillor Ellis.
I've got one question, which is about the potential for growth. Do you have the actual physical grounds, the would you need to relocate?
Very good question. No, we absolutely wouldn't. We're really lucky that we're on a very substantial site. We've already started the preliminary work with the Educational Authority, so they've been out, they've looked at the sort of the floor, the foot space, the footprint of our external area, and they're very sort of secure that there is enough ground. And actually, should we be successful with the 3G facility, that negates the need for as much field space because it counts as double, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Would Richard Baker like to come forward, please? From Stamford Association Football Club. Thank you. And you will have 3 minutes to speak when you're ready, and a 30-second warning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Council. I'm Richard Baker. I'm the Director of Stamford Association Football Club. As many of you may know, Stamford Football Club is a well-run, rapidly growing, community-led club. We thrive thanks to the involvement and interest of local people, entirely volunteers. Since our move to Borderville in 2014, the club and its provision has absolutely boomed. We now provide a wider range of educational opportunities and sport at all times of the year for people of all ages and abilities across the community. More than 30 different teams play at the club each week, from under 6s to over 60s. The only constraint on our future expansion is our facilities. Unfortunately, our junior grass pitches are in relatively poor condition and often unusable, largely because they sit in a valley and are quick to waterlog. We hope to amend that as part of the development that is being proposed today. The plans for 1,350 new homes and a new valley park will unquestionably bring huge benefits by encouraging more people to walk and cycle to Borderville, enabling more players to easily access the facilities, providing more demand for the football academy that we run in conjunction with Stamford College. It will allow the club to become even more of a community hub, and it will of course attract more sponsors, club members and supporters. We support the application for all of these reasons. Furthermore, the intended reorientation of our facilities provides a unique opportunity to upgrade our provision to outstanding new levels for new and existing residents of Stamford. In fact, I'd go further. We would probably in the future have the best local community football club for many, many miles around. We've been working closely for over 2 years now with Nick and Alice from Gummer Leiths to plan the infrastructure we need to allow more people to benefit and become involved in football and other sport at all levels. We support the plans irrespective of the benefit that it will bring to the football club,
30 seconds.
but can see the potentially transformational benefit of working together to deliver a much improved facility. We're not just supportive of the plans, but actually we are genuinely excited about the positive change that this project can bring. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question? Councillor Smith?
Hi, thanks for that. Do you have any concerns about the position of the link road? Because that's something we've heard previously.
being entirely honest, we're not experts in traffic or planning of that nature, so the football club has concerned itself principally with the transformation of the sporting facilities on the site, and it's not something that we would have a professional qualified view on.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question? No? That's fine. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. If I could now call forward Tim Leafs from Gummer Leafs, who's representing the applicant. Thank you. And you'll have 3 minutes. You want to indicate when you're ready?
Thank you. I'm ready. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. Just reflecting upon what Richard and Vicky have just been through and explained to the committee as to how they're viewing the development, I think just exemplifies exactly what we hope and what we've been trying to achieve as we think about Stamford North and the relationship with the existing community. This is just one of many areas where we can continue to have dialogue, which is going to be positive to the new, but of crucially as well to the existing community. I think we've also got to take a step back and realise what a fortunate position we're in at the moment on this, because we've got a very sound policy with a thriving town, with 2 landowners who are charities who've got a huge amount of patience and a huge amount of desire for Stamford to continue to be an excellent place to live and to play and just to be a resident and part of the community. Rarely does that take place together, and I think that's a very special element to all of what we've been able to do. And because of that, we've taken our job very seriously in terms of listening to the community. And Alice and Nick, who've been out and about over many months, almost in years now, have spent so much time listening. And we've, as Officer mentioned, Adam mentioned, we've spoken to so many different authorities and statutory bodies and community groups as we try to put our application together and our strategy together for this development. Of course, unfortunately, there are sometimes things we just can't respond to that will make everybody happy. That is just the nature of development at this scale. We have to find a balance, and we think we found that balance, which is going to be for the greater good for the existing community, but also the new community. And that is something that we have to think about what Stamford's going to be like in the next 10 years, 15 years, and beyond. And that's why we've taken these very careful decisions, but we do accept that sometimes not everybody will be happy. It's a balance. We are representing the new community amongst the existing community that's there now, and that is always a difficult part of our job. I think, again, what we haven't underestimated is the importance of open space, and that came back loud and clear in our consultation. Bringing forward the park that we'll be doing will be by far the biggest contribution to open space in Stamford over the last, ever, and plus the linear park, which we've talked about, is of great benefit to how people move around. It goes towards the health, and it goes towards how nature will travel through the site as well. We're at a stage now to outline. We've got lots more to do, lots more...
30 seconds.
Thank you. Lots more detail to come forward, and there'll be continuous dialogue as we move through. I think it's just to say that we've got this wonderful opportunity now. We've got really strong policy position, we've got wonderful landowners, and we've got a wonderful opportunity. And we just hope we can continue to work with everyone like we have over the last few years to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have questions? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. It appears a lot of the issues that have been raised so far have been due to the bund. So could you sort of clarify to me why you chose to remove the bund and have the road there rather than have the road at the northern side? Is it purely down to cost?
Good question. Do you mind if we bring forward some other members of the team who put a bit more of the detail? Thank you. And Nick, I think it's probably best to explain this. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm Nick Berman. I'm on the team with Tim and the others. So the bund, the sort of theory behind the bund from our perspective is essentially we want to put forward the Valley Park, which I remember if you see on the illustrative master plan and on the parameter plans, that's a key part of the scheme, which is the point of that is effectively to give as many of the new residents access to green space, and also the existing residents will be able to go up to that park and walk uninterrupted between that and the new Gouache Meadows. So effectively, that can act as a walking and cycling route across the whole site, whereby people don't have to get in their cars to access amenities, for example, the Borderville Sports Centre, Stamford Welland Academy, the new primary school, etc. So first and foremost, that is a way where people can sort of have a healthy lifestyle by walking from one side to the other. In addition, it acts as a nature corridor. I'm coming onto the bund bit, but this is a key reason in terms of the logic behind it. But also, it's working with the landscape and the natural drainage of what is effectively a valley, which is the site that we're talking about. And that means that the water can attenuate and be drained naturally through the centre, which is why we're going to the trouble of effectively putting that park in, and why we've been working with Borderville about potentially relocating those grass pitches, is effectively so we can have that new park which links to the other park. Now, as it pertains to the bund is related to where the link road goes, and Tom, one of the speakers earlier accurately characterised the difficult decision and some of the key factors involved in the decision on that. It's a question of where you put the link road effectively, and in our judgment, for the reasons that were set out, and I'll reiterate, that is the best place for the link road is to the south of Borderville. And the reasons why that is, and it's probably better to show on an illustrative master plan, but if you do the road to the south, it leaves that new park, which will be used by new and existing residents, completely uninterrupted by the main road and that main bit of traffic. Yes, they're absolutely right that there will be some traffic going up down Ryle Road, which will sort of break the link, but effectively the link road in that location allows for that park to flourish and act as a nature corridor. And I can go into more detail on the other options and further north if that would be helpful to the committee. But as a result, that is the best location for it. In addition, it is the shortest and most direct route for most of the people who will be using that road, which is the people coming from north up Ryle Road to then turn left to use that route. That is the most efficient and direct route across town compared to doing it further north. And thirdly, it effectively minimises the number of residential frontages which back onto the road. So because of Borderville Sports Centre and doing it to the south, a lot of the road will be fronted by Borderville Sports Centre and therefore doesn't need to have houses looking onto it, which is a benefit as well. So I can assure you that the last thing we want to be doing is having a lot of upset residents at plans when we've already tried to set out our approach. That is, we're trying to avoid that at all costs. However, we had a difficult decision to make about what's in the best interests of the new residents, but also for the long term about what is the best place for the road. Now, we completely understand that residents came to us after the consultation and we had very good dialogues with them about their concerns about noise, light and biodiversity and all of the things that Councillor Bisnow said, as well as some of the speakers. And as the planning, as Adam said earlier, we went and conducted studies to basically say, right, what actually is this impact going to be? And we created an indicative layout, because this is an outline application, so obviously we're not going into the full layout of that exact site now, but to respond to the residents and assess this point properly, we created an indicative layout, tested it, and that showed that rows of housing in that location can actually perform the same or better than the bund itself from an acoustic and lighting perspective. So we wanted to we think that's the best location for the road, and the residents' concerns can actually, in terms of noise and lighting, the evidence shows that that is actually not a problem. So on that basis, we took the difficult decision, knowing full well that there'd be an argument and people would not be happy with it, that actually it was the right call. And the authority have also agreed to put in place a condition, which is to say that when we actually do the final design, that we have to put new lighting and acoustic assessments, testing that to ensure that there is no negative impact and no adverse impact on the residents. So we are We are taking great care.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you kind of wrap up for us
Sorry.
now, please?
Sorry. Yes,
yeah.
I've wrapped up. There you go.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. Did anyone else have a question? Councillor Wood. Sorry, I can't take questions from the floor. Sorry. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. It's following up on the bund, actually, so I don't wish to prolong your speech, but you explained in a lot of detail the reason for getting rid of the bund and for the development and site, but I got the impression you think it's just going to be the same noise effects or reduced noise effects with the properties there. I didn't get any impression you were going to do any acoustic walling or screening or anything like that. I know you're going to say you're going to test it at the end to see what effect it is. Do you think that'll be enough then? Is that what you're really saying? Have you got any proposals to actually mitigate the noise effects by removing the bund, apart from just putting dwellings there?
Sorry, I'll be very quick. Yes, no, there are 2 rows of houses. The evidence shows we tested those and they act the same or better than the bund. And that includes if you do reverberations through gaps of 2 rows of housing. The modelling includes that, and that's in our environmental statement where you can see that it's better because they are effectively the same height or a bit higher, and they block sound better than a bit of earth like that. So yes is the answer.
Councillor Bird.
Thank you. Just a quick question, just to try and get my head around the route, the planned route of the road. Is the proposal for that to go at the bottom of the valley along the waterlogged pitches?
No, that's the park is going to go along the bottom of the valley. The road is going to go to the south of Borderville Sports Centre, away from the park.
Sorry, so which side of Borderville is the valley?
The north side. No.
The valley runs to the north of Borderville Sports Centre. The road would be to the south.
Sorry, so is the road where the waterlogged pitches are?
Is it possible to bring up an illustration that may help?
Let me just bring it. So just to give members an indication, so what you've got on the screen in front of you is the plan at the top is the historic topography of the site before Borderville was created and put in, and then the plan to the bottom is the site topography as it is today. What the Valley Park is doing, so the actual proposed walking area parkland that we've discussed, is reintroducing that historic valley which is to the north of Borderville, so that the land sort of outlined here in red that sticks out slightly, that's the location of the existing sports centre. So the Valley Park comes to the north of it, the link road itself will come to the south of Borderville Sports Centre. So there's that's the 2 differences.
Thank you, David.
I think just to follow up on what Councillor Bird said, a previous speaker mentioned there's 2 pitches that at some times of the year probably aren't able to use, and from what we've been told they will move to the west side of the sports centre. So instead of being on the southern side, they'll move to the what Councillor Bird was asking, will the road go where those pitches are? Will it go where the bund is?
The road comes to the south here, which is where the land is marked by the bund. The grass training pitches that are being removed at the back of the clubhouse, that's where the Valley Park will go through.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm a little bit confused here again with this bund. So we're all in agreement that there's a need for a bund or some sort of sound deflection there, be that the bund or the new houses that are coming in. What's going to protect the new houses?
this is it's a very good question. We've discussed this a lot with the residents as well as our acoustic engineers. So effectively, new houses are very regularly or houses are very regularly next to sports centres. If you look just in the league that they're in, that the Stamford AFC are in, there are, you know, Royston Town, Long Eaton United, Berkhamsted FC. Many football clubs have houses right next to them, and I think it's important to say that the acoustics are well within the potential, you know, ability. It's well within the ability of the acoustic mitigation on the houses for them to be within acceptable levels within the house, and that's what comes down to the condition that South Kesteven are putting in place. Will be that we have to do the acoustic assessments for both new and existing residents to ensure they are compliant. Otherwise, we won't be able to build them. So, but yes, my point about them, the other ones, is that it regularly happens, and the noise is not so much that houses can't be near football stadiums. Quite the opposite, they regularly are.
But prior to that, we've just agreed that there is a need for the bund there, and now we're saying there isn't. I can't quite get my head around it, Chair, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Do you mind if we ask one?
Excuses. We need as much evidence as we want, provided the answers are relevant to the question specifically and don't expand. Then you may speak.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I suppose just to try and help in that regard and take us back to the original permission of the condition that you talked about earlier, when that was done, a lot of the material for that was the spoil. So at that time, there was only one scenario modelled as part of the application. The only scenario that was modelled as part of the application was the with bund scenario. So there wasn't a without bund or a different bund. There was just the material that we had and the bund that was actually provided. Then the council was quite right. Their only option, given that the evidence was that that bund provided suitable mitigation, was to condition it to be required. So that's hence the condition that we've now got. And again, ultimately, we will need to vary that condition when the details of the bund area are determined through any subsequent reserve matters to make sure that that's providing the adequate alternative solution. And just finally, on the other point, is that clearly, you know, this sort of centre wasn't there at the time the existing houses were constructed. They didn't have to take account, you know, of this potential noise source. But with the new houses, firstly with improved technology, but secondly that we have an existing noise source that we're aware of and can plan for and orientate properties to. That's why we can provide mitigation for houses which are closer to the source than is the case at the moment.
Sorry, thank you. Actually, I have a question, if I may, just following up from that. Where we talk about the houses in relation to the sports centre, you mentioned 2 rows of houses. Have I got this right, that the other side will be the road? Have I misunderstood?
I think the important thing to remember at this point, councillors, is that we're not looking at the detailed layout. What has been tested is an option which looks at the road and the potential for 2 houses to test whether in principle you can provide an alternative scheme. What you're considering today is an outline application. You're not actually considering that detailed scheme that comes through by the condition itself.
That actually, in a way, kind of picks up my next final question, which was, given the concerns that have been raised regarding the locations of those houses and proximity to the centre and the road, we are only looking actually at the outline and no actual, in fact, detail within the development. So therefore, would there be scope for you to listen to what we're saying and to consider the layout appropriately?
Yes, I mean, certainly the layout's not fixed. So just to be clear, that the road will be the very northern part of that section, and the 2 rows of houses would both be to the south of it. So they'd both be to the south of that. But yes, you know, we've shown how it could be done, but certainly, you know, there's further discussion to be done as to how it actually might be done.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. What I'm going to suggest now, because we've heard all of our speakers and we've actually been going for over 2 hours, is to suggest that we have a break of about 10 minutes, just enough time to get a drink and a break, and then we'll come back. I will politely ask all committee members to not discuss this case whilst we are having that break, please, to observe that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone for persevering with us. We have now had all of our speakers, and so we now move over to formal period of debate and questions of our officer. Because of the number of core issues that have emerged, we thought it might be appropriate to split this session up into different subjects, and then if anybody feels there's anything extra they want to add, you're very welcome to do that. So the first point we think that's come up is the situation regarding Sports England. Are you all comfortable with that? Would you like further clarification regarding that? Because it's quite a fundamental part of this. I think it could be worth just perhaps asking Adam to just give us a brief explanation, please.
So yeah, just to take committee back to the situation, the parameters plan and the way it's designed means that the Valley Park would run through the land to the north of the existing sports centre, which includes the removal of these 4 training pitches here, which you've heard from the speakers do have existing issues in terms of drainage, which means that they're not the best quality pitches for them. What that means is that replacement provision needs to be made through the application, and Sport England have raised an objection because they are not satisfied that that can be secured. The fundamental difference in position between ourselves as the local planning authority and Sport England is that Sport England are unwilling to rely on contributions or replacement provision being secured through a Section 106 agreement because they are not the signatories to that agreement. They are not the determining authority for the replacement pitches, so ultimately they would be reliant upon us to consider whether the details are acceptable or not. We are satisfied that there are options available to make that replacement pitch provision on site, that options have been tested to demonstrate that that would be possible, and that the Section 106 agreement would secure the necessary details to make sure that it meets our test in terms of replacement provision of equivalent or better quality, and also then meets with Sport England's guidance. But that process would be subject to consultation with Sport England when we get that detailed design scheme.
Thank you. Does anybody have a further question on that? No. Can you just please clarify the role of the Secretary of State because of the involvement of Sport England, please?
Yes, so Sport England are a statutory consultee on any application that affects playing pitches or may prejudice the use of playing pitches. Because in this case they have an objection which specifically relates to the potential loss of playing pitches, we have a legal duty as the local planning authority to refer the application to the Secretary of State for them to decide whether they want to call the application in and hold a public inquiry on the application. We would then, if members are minded to resolve to approve the application, what we would do is refer the application to the Secretary of State with our recommendation for approval subject to the conditions and the legal agreement. And the Secretary of State would then have 21 days to determine if they then want to call the application in to determine themselves. If they do not call the application in, it would then be open to the local planning authority to then go ahead and grant that planning permission.
Thank you very much. It is a very unusual situation, which is why I asked for that to be clarified. The other issue that seems to be emerging is a concern regarding the highways. Did anyone want to debate that or have any questions about that? Councillor Crawford first, thank you.
Thank you. As I have used the A1 and the junction slip road that goes off and then you go onto the A606 then down to Sydney Farm Lane, I know that that slip road, when it's busy, backs up onto the A1. Now that for me is very dangerous, and have they considered that? Because I'm sure that that is northbound, southbound and northbound. Those slip roads are not long enough, and that one is particularly short, I have to say, for the amount of traffic, increase in traffic.
Thank you. Would you be able to...
So all the junctions onto the A1 that are related to the site, as well as the junctions within Stamford themselves, that local highways network, that has been fully assessed by National Highways in terms of that A1, those A1 junctions, and then the local highways authority. They have looked at the existing situation, taken that into account, modelled the impact of the development upon that, and that's where we come to that situation, Councillor Crawford, where they have acknowledged that some of those junctions are already over capacity, and therefore it's an existing issue that they have to address rather than being a condition for the developers to mitigate.
Helen?
Right, I was wondering where those 6 junctions were, because it's the off the A1, not going onto the A1's my concern. It's coming off the A1 where the traffic stands. Thank you. But thank you for that clarification.
Do you have a plan that could show that?
So the plan on the screen in front of you at the moment shows all of the junctions that have been included within the modelling. Now, those junctions that are identified as being over capacity is junction 3, which is within Stamford. So that's the North Street, Scottgate, West Street, A606 junction. So that's the one at the bottom of Empicombe Road, Caston Road. Junction 4, which is the one over here, which is the Brazen Nose, East Street, signalised cross the road, so the one just after you come past Stamford and Dowd School. Junction 10, which is the A1 northbound off-slip road and the A606 junction. Junction 12, which is the next one down, which is the A1 northbound off-slip and the Tinwell Road junction. And then the other ones that are identified as over capacity is Junction 18, which is the Ryle Road, Uffington Road mini roundabout near the hospital. And then Junction 24, which is the Kettering Road A1 off-slip junction.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It relates to highways, but it's more concerned with the 106 contributions requested by Lincs County Council. I notice they've requested quite a few contributions, and also quite a few of the public speakers, and I think Councillor Harris referred to it, those as well. They seem quite sensible suggestions to me, but I know, Adam, you said you disagreed with them, they're not verified it, or... So could you explain that, please? I'm a bit confused with that issue.
Yes, so County Council highways have made requests for improvement works to a number of junctions, not junctions, sorry, so they want a signalised crossing point at Sydney Farm Lane, and then traffic calming measures to be included at Arran Road and then the Radcliffe Road as well. You'll appreciate, members, I'm sure we've discussed this many times before, is that where we are looking to include financial contributions, there is a duty for them to be demonstrated that they meet the relevant legal tests. Now, as we went through in terms of the presentation, those tests are that the contributions are necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to the development, and then fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. Now, the response received from the County Council refers to these contributions and looks and uses words such as could be required or potential improvements. Our judgment as officers is the actual wording and the nature of the contributions requested do not demonstrate that those contributions are actually necessary to mitigate the impact of the development, and rather it's our view that they are come across as being desirable. Ultimately, though, committee, you are the decision maker on that point. You are entitled to take your own judgment on that. You have the full response from the County Council in front of you. If you feel that the information in front of you is sufficient to satisfy those tests, it is within your gift to request that to be included within those heads of terms. The only point that I would make on that is that the contributions requested are the result of the entirety of the modelling, which includes both the Stamford North development and the Quarry Farm development. So if members do want those contributions to be included, the proportionate approach would be to require a pro rata contribution from this development as opposed to the totality of the sums requested.
Have you, Adam, then, do you intend to follow that up with the County Council, to ask for more evidence, or have you got their final response, what we're seeing here in front of us?
Yes, so the final response that you see in front of you, councillors, that was appended is their final response. We have gone back to try and get additional information, but again, none of the information that has been provided goes any further than what has been presented to you.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Sorry, forgive me. I just want to follow that up because it's quite an important point. So what you're saying is, if we were minded and it was a particular concern to members, we can actually today ask for that to be, but with the caveats that you've explained to us.
Ultimately, the committee are the decision makers on this. As officers, we have made a professional judgment as to whether they meet those legal tests as to being capable of being secured. But yourselves as the committee are the ones that ultimately are the decision makers here. If you are satisfied that the information you have is sufficient to demonstrate those contributions do meet those legal tests, then it's entirely within your gift to request that that is included within the heads of terms, and the resolution reflect that accordingly.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison. Oh, sorry, apologies. Councillor Bird, and then Councillor Harrison, and then Councillor and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. Yes, just on the traffic and the transport. From what you say, the LCC has already identified that several of these junctions are already over capacity and are causing a problem. Have they indicated, irrespective of this development, what plans they have to upgrade and improve those for the existing conditions? So, because clearly if there is no planned improvement in the first place, then any improvements that come after this development will be quite delayed as far as any support for the town.
That's ultimately a separate matter with the County Council. Councillor Bird, it's outside of the remit of this application because they've determined that there are already existing issues that they need to mitigate. It's something that I suggest that residents probably want to take up with the County Council to try and see if they are actually going to go ahead with schemes for that.
Yes, so I just wondered if they'd actually indicated anything that was already in process. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I understand you wanted to say something.
Thank you. No, all I was just going to draw members' attention to is the comments from County Council, in which they do confirm that no junctions are predicted to be severely over capacity as a result of the development. So whilst they've acknowledged that there is a capacity issue, the test that we've got to follow in terms of the MPPF is whether or not the impact is severe, and County are confirming it's not. That's why it's a county problem that they've got to deal with, but it's not a this development issue that they've got to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. First one, I think, is just a point of information. I think, unless I'm reading it wrong, 7.9.18, 123, the bottom of page 123. Modelling results on the individual 17 junctions, 12 of which are okay, and then it says 6 go over. So, by my edition, that's 18 junctions, not 17. Is that just a typo? If we can get that changes on there, I think.
Do you want to just clarify?
Just to make it right, that's all, it's just a point of info. But my question is, what worries me is the caveats that are on here. We recently had one that came back, it had caveats on it, and it came back and reneged on everything, and the caveats that were put in place previously were wiped off, in effect, and that worries me with this. Is there anything we can do with this that puts these cast iron or not?
Which contributions or elements of it specifically you're referring to, Councillor Harrison?
Sorry, the parts of the works that must be completed before other things can go on. There's a number of them in the thing. So it worries me that, you know, a year down the line or whatever, they come back and go, well, we need to do this before we can do that, and we end up in the same situation we had in recently.
Ultimately, they are being imposed as either conditions or legal obligations within the joint infrastructure agreement, for example, of the link road. That is based on the evidence. We cannot refuse to entertain an application for anything else. But if another application to amend those details comes in, it would be incumbent upon the applicant to demonstrate what has materially changed, provide the evidence to change that. Based on the evidence that we have today and the information available, those conditions and obligations are being imposed because we consider them to be necessary, and the way that the conditions are worded, we consider to be capable of enforcement.
Thank you. Councillor Bellamy.
Adam, you mentioned that if we did ask for these extra road safety measures on Sydney, Farm Lane and Arran Road, and I think there's another one. If we did ask for that, you said that it could be divvied up sort of pro rata. Who else would have to share the cost of that? I've got another question as well, please.
So the modelling that has been undertaken looks at the totality of Stamford North and then the Quarry Farm development. So what we're suggesting in terms of a pro rata contribution is it's the reasonable and proportionate amount to request from this application would be equivalent to, it's essentially 2/3 of the contributions requested. Essentially, the remaining part should then come from the Quarry Farm development, but ultimately that is then a decision for Rutland County Council if they are willing to put that money forward for it.
My other question would be, I think previously we've said that if your assessment is that this doesn't meet the test to be required as part of the 106. So if we are saying that it is, we want it included in that, if that's appealed, is that up to us to defend rather than the county council?
I mean, ultimately, if we include an obligation or a condition and the developer appeals it, it's us as the planning authority that have intended to do that. What I will say, though, is you have a consultee response in front of you from the county council that clearly sets out why they have requested the sum. We've made a judgment as planning officers towards you about whether we think they meet those tests, but as I say, you can take a difference of professional opinion on that.
That makes a pleasant change in a way, isn't it, to be in this position. Excuse me, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether this is a point for reserved matters, but with regards to the link road, are there crossings planned within that?
That is something that comes into the detailed design, Councillor Smith, yeah.
And where the path through the park to the Valley Park meets Ryle Road, are there plans for a pedestrian crossing there?
Again, that comes out through the detailed design for that area as well.
And finally, yes, going back to the point that was raised with regards to the Section 106 and the crossings elsewhere, I think personally we're trying to encourage active travel and children accessing school. I think we should try and make it as safe as possible. That would be my view.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a comment to the point Councillor Harrison made. I think that you're right that there are issues where you've got targets, and unfortunately in the past developers just go under the target. But my understanding is, looking at the conditions, there are quite a few actually which are very sound, that you can't actually progress to development unless they are actually met. An example being, for example, the treatment, sewage treatment plan is one, water provision plan is another one. So it's not everything. There are some aspects of this which are more infrastructural, where actually they can't start development unless they're in place, which is more, to me, more reassuring actually. So the other point then that was raised was the bund. Obviously that's come up as a big concern. Does anybody have any questions or points they want to raise regarding the bond? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. It is the bee in my bonnet, as you gathered. Is there no workaround on this? Being as the developer said that there are new means of updated versions of bunds now that we can use. Is there nothing we can use, a new updated version of a bund that can be incorporated along the side of the road and then keeps everybody happy?
Strictly speaking, Councillor, that's entirely possible. I think the important thing to remember for this application is what we have considered is, as a matter of principle, can you remove the bund and do something else that provides the same level of mitigation? That's what the modelling has done. The modelling has looked at a potential scenario to just satisfy that question of, is there a potential alternative? The conditions that you have in front of you relating to the actual noise assessment and lighting assessment that comes out as part of the detailed design, that's where the actual definitive replacement mitigation comes through. So it's entirely possible that through those assessments you design a layout and it comes out that actually you need an alternative bund, an acoustic wall, acoustic fencing, something along those lines. That's what that condition is there to look at. But ultimately for this application, as a planning authority, we need to be satisfied, could you do something different that does the same level of mitigation? And the assessments have shown, yes, in theory, you can do.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to? Councillor Ellis.
Yeah, could somebody tell me the distance between where the stadium is and the houses?
I don't know that measurement off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Because clearly that is a relevant something to take into consideration.
Councillor Ellis, it might be helpful if you just clarified, are you referring to proposed housing or to proposed housing? I think the point there is that's yet to be decided. It's the favourite of the planning committee, it's the outline, and I know that means we don't have that detail. So it's not possible to confirm at the moment. It will be a certain distance. What we can assure you is the condition in the papers allows for the principle of the bund to be removed, but it doesn't actually allow that bund to be removed until such a time that we're satisfied that the solution's in place. And then the same will go for each of the reserved matter parcels that we deal with. We will need to make sure that that layout is suitable and appropriate. So all it is that all we're agreeing today is that in principle that bund can come out because there are alternatives that we will need to discuss later. And I know that's really difficult for everybody to kind of get to grips with because we don't have that information, but it is something that we have to deal with outline applications, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Councillor Bird.
Thank you. If we're looking at in principle, has it been modelled, is it in principle possible to keep the bund and have the road but just not worry about the houses?
That's not what's been assessed ultimately, Councillor Bird. What has been put forward is an option that has been modelled and shown as being acceptable, and as a planning authority that is ultimately what our duty is. There may be alternative schemes out there that could be better, there could be different ways of doing it, but our role as a planning authority is to assess what has been put to us and whether or not that is acceptable.
If I may come back on that, we're being told it's an outline matters only application. So therefore, in my mind, especially given what you were saying earlier about the fact that we could have alternative acoustic solutions, potentially, that does give scope, perhaps this for our committee, if we were minded to approve, to also put within there perhaps some things that we would consider would not be potentially acceptable for future design to be looking at. Is that the case?
The only point I'd raise on that, Council, would be you would need to be demonstrating evidence as to why it's necessary to impose that, and what evidence do we have to suggest that you need to keep the bund and put the road in a certain location, when the evidence in front of us shows you as a principle you can remove that bund and do something different, and that can be achieved.
Okay, so that's the argument for removing the bund, but we're still saying though, because I think a lot of concern is that I don't think people are totally swayed by the provision of housing to act as a sound and light barrier instead of the bund. But you mentioned that we could potentially, though, through the acoustic condition, look at an acoustic fence, perhaps landscaped acoustic fence, something like that as a solution instead.
That's entirely what that condition does, Councillor. Yeah, it does not. We've had an option presented to us that looks at housing as acoustic mitigation, but the condition in front of you does not specifically say that is the scheme of mitigation. What the condition says is when you look at the detailed design through the Reserved Matters application, you have to then do a noise assessment and show suitable mitigation at that point. That could include an alternative scheme, as we say, as a smaller bund, something like that, an acoustic wall, acoustic fence, something as that. That scheme will come through that condition in conjunction with the Reserved Matters that looks at the layout of that part of the site.
Could that even perhaps include a hybrid where we retain some of the bund but replace some of it?
That may be an option that comes out in the future. What you're being asked through this application as an outline and description that is in front of you is for removal of the bund. There is nothing to suggest that through that condition part of the bund may be retained, an alternative scheme of mitigation provided alongside that, but we cannot definitively say that would be the option. What has been tested is the option for removal of the bund in full and something different being put in place. We have said that is acceptable in principle, so if the applicant in the future comes forward with the Reserved Matters and the noise assessment with that option, we've established that that is reasonable. It is possible, though, they may come forward with something slightly different, including partly keeping the bund, and that may also be a suitable option.
Thank you. Penny?
Yes, I mean, I quite understand the doubt and uncertainty that comes with this at the outline stage. It's a frustration to many of us. However, I do think a lot of work's already been done, and there are these options to come, and a lot does depend on those Reserved Matters, and that is where this committee needs to be kept updated and kept informed and hear all the details at that stage. So I do understand the doubt and uncertainty at the moment, but we've also heard why the road needs to go south of the stadium and the value of the Valley Park. I've got to admit I had to ask about this on the site visit because I couldn't understand why at the time, but I see it now and I can see the contours, and there is huge value to that Valley Park. So the problem of mitigation and the bund, I'm afraid, I really do think we are going to have to rely on the Reserved Matters and the conditions being put in place and hold back on our doubts and concerns, because it is an outline application, and that is part of the nature of an outline application, unfortunately. And the same goes, well, I won't move on, but I think, unpopular as it might sound, that is the nature of the way I think we have to move forward. And if the bund can't be removed at the Reserved Matters stage because they can't mitigate it, then that will be determined then. So it is an understanding of where we're at an outline stage, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fellows.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to absolutely agree with the comments by Councillor Milne. I haven't heard anyone object about the housing. I can't see that there would be an objection, and yet I think all the problems Councillor Milne has just satisfactorily described and indicated the way we need to go forward. So I just wanted to totally support what Councillor Milne just said.
Sorry, Councillor Bellamy.
I think with this one, it's a matter of pros and cons. There's a lot of pros to this, with the football club in particular and the school that are very keen on it. As a district council, we need the housing, we need especially the affordable housing. Councillor Mills has mentioned about the Valley Park and that. I mean, that's not just a benefit to the future users, or the people that live there, I should say, not the future users, but it's a value to everybody really that lives there. And I think that's part of the, is it the big wheel they call it, or the route round part of Stamford, yeah, that's for cycling. And without that, it means that the road, that uninterrupted route, would be cut in half by the road. I think that obviously one of the big sticking points is this bund, but I'm not convinced that that can't be overcome, because the leisure centre or the sports centre sits below where the houses are. The bund is bigger on the sports centre side than it is on where the road side will be. So it's not beyond the realms of engineering to have a fence following that road that does the same as what the bund does, in my opinion. The only thing I would want to include in it, if we were to approve it, is the fact that those transport issues that County mentioned would be included in part of the S106 agreement, because I think they're wholly sensible suggestions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other... Councillor Smith?
Sorry, it was just a question with regards to the Section 106 and the affordable housing provision. It's down as 45% affordable rented. I just wondered, with the problems of finding rented in Stamford, whether it would be sensible or possible to have that in perpetuity, or whether it's best to be left as just 45%.
So the affordable housing and the tenure split, as I mentioned during the presentation, that has been specifically designed looking at that imbalance in affordable housing at the moment. So it is very much looking at addressing the issues that you mentioned, Councillor Smith, there, yeah.
Thank you. On that front, actually, just a couple of thoughts. First of all, the valley is also, I mean, the actual site is hugely important for wildlife and the wildlife habitat there. So it would help create a really important corridor for that. And my understanding is we've got conditions in place to provide wildlife habitat space and enhance it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's condition 20 on your schedule of conditions, councillors, that requires an ecological assessment and biodiversity plan to be provided with each reserve matters application. What we have established through this outline application, that is, in principle, the site can deliver a 20% net gain, broadly speaking, in habitat and hedgerow units. The vast majority of that is being delivered as part of the parkland on the eastern side of Ryle Road, but yes, the Valley Park contributes extensively to that, as will retaining the high quality features that are on site as far as possible. That detail will come through those individual impact assessments for each reserve matters application.
Thank you. I think the other, I do think is really positive, and you so rarely see this, is the fact that the proposal is to provide almshouses as well, with specialist housing support. That is so desperately needed and so rare to actually have an application come forward with that type of housing. I think, I know we've discussed the bund quite a lot. I think my only concern is that I feel much more comfortable knowing it's going forward with the bund removal being an option rather than, if we approve this today, it being the only solution. Can you just clarify that?
As we say, the planning permission is for removal of that bund, but the details come through the reserved matters. I suppose the one comfort that I can give council is that the way that the constitution is drafted is those reserved matters applications will come back to committee. So ultimately committee again will have the opportunity to consider those details when those applications do come in.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comment that they want to make or any proposal they'd like to make? Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, it's just one about the NHS consultation. So I presumed you consulted with Lincolnshire. Did you consult with Cambridgeshire? Because most of the people that live in Stamford, if there's any issues, they're going to be heading to Peterborough, which is in Cambridgeshire, not going to be heading towards Grantham, Boston or Lincoln, which are Lincolnshire hospitals. So have you consulted with them to see if they've got the capacity to entertain? Thank you.
There was widespread engagement with the various different ICBs on this one, Councillor Crawford. As you say, Cambridgeshire, Lincolnshire, including Leicestershire, Rutland as well. There was initially a strategic board where the different parties were discussing it as well. They then took themselves apart and decided they wanted to look at things individually. But yes, we have looked at those cross-boundary issues, in particular, trying to make sure that the different ICBs are talking to each other.
Thank you very much. That's put my mind at rest.
As a point of information, I'm on the Health Scrutiny Committee for the district, and actually yesterday, as Councillor Cleaver will attest, this subject actually, the future growth of Stamford and the health resources came up, and what we were basically advised that GP provision would be provided, but it's where people register. Of course, the NHS don't know where people are going to want to register until they're actually in the properties. So it's not ideal, to be honest with you. But we'll start with how the NHS work. Vanessa.
Thank you. It was just for a little bit of clarification on that, actually. So, with regards to the Section 106 and healthcare, it says that the land on the site will be safeguarded until the occupation of the 650 dwelling. If the land has not been requested by that time, the full financial contribution will be payable. Does that mean that there's a potential that it might not be used for healthcare? Like, as in, what's the fallback position if nobody wants to run a site there? Does that make sense?
So we have consulted with the NHS. The Section 106 heads of terms are directly related to what they have asked for in terms of land being made available. Those conversations have ultimately highlighted that the NHS are also looking at multiple different options within Stamford about where they want a new health centre to be. That may be on Stamford North, it may be at an alternative site within Stamford itself. Ultimately, what we are doing is safeguarding land for the NHS to have time to make that decision. And if they ultimately choose another site in Stamford that would provide a health centre to mitigate this development, then the developer quite rightly then has to pay a financial contribution as opposed to actually providing the land and the centre itself.
Thank you. Another point actually that I have raised outside the meeting with our officers was I looked at the fire and rescue comments, and they had a number of requirements regarding, in particular, access to water, which have to go in quite early. I was advised, and I just want to check this would be acceptable, that could be an informative to add to this application for the next stage. So I think it's really important we don't lose sight of their requirements.
Yeah, more than happy if members wish to. We can include an informative directing the applicants to those comments from fire and rescue. As you say, the points raised are all valid points, but they all relate to the detailed design of the scheme. So yeah, as part of the reserved matters, that would be appropriately considered.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to raise any other points or ask any questions? No? Does anybody want to go to a proposal? Councillor Bellamy.
Well, of the discussions we've had, I haven't heard anybody with a definitive reason why it should be refused. I'm quite happy. I'll propose it, provided that the S106 money requested by county for the road improvements is included. As I've pointed out, I'm pretty sure that the bund issue can be overcome one way or another when it comes back to reserve matters. After what we've heard today, we're not going to forget about that, are we? So I'm quite happy to propose it with a proviso that that's the money for the road improvements, the pedestrian crossings, road calming is included in the S106 agreement.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fellows. Thank you.
Can I just clarify, would that be the full ask from county, or would that be the pro rata, which is approximately 2/3 of the cost requested? Thank you.
Have county commented on that? I presume it'd have to be pro rata, wouldn't it? So
that would be my advice, because we've got to make sure that it's reasonably necessary but also proportionate and mitigating its own needs. And I think, as Adam's already explained, the original ask is on the basis of the whole development, which includes both the Quarry Farm Rutland scheme and the SK side of the scheme as well. Unfortunately, no. Sorry, Adam. Unfortunately, that's really difficult. I'd suggest that we perhaps put something into the Quarry Farm response that we're about to debate after this one, to make sure that that's known, that they need to be making that provision. Rutland County Council operate on a SIL basis, so it's a case, and we've signed a statement of common ground with Rutland to make sure that we continue to have that positive dialogue around ensuring that the infrastructure, and recognising that the impact, a lot of the impact is on Stamford, and therefore that's where we need to be looking at the infrastructure. So I would suggest we put that into that Quarry Farm response.
Do I need to add at this point about the fire and rescue note, or is that something that's outside the proposal?
I think for belts and braces it would be a good idea, otherwise I could have used my discretion, but yes, it would help. And also just clarifying perhaps that Councillor Fellows, who seconded it, is in agreement with the...
Are you happy, proposed and seconded, to include that? In that case, sorry, Councillor Mills, did you want to?
Yes, if I could just go back slightly about the sports pitches. I mean, I do note there are positive arrangements for alternative and better pitches for the sports centre. I think the preference would be on-site as far as possible, and really put in the margins, you know, the alternative to go off-site, because that really would create some managerial problems. The other question that was raised was about the tennis club probably requiring land. I don't quite know how that would fit into any process of allowing some land for them to relocate.
So, starting with the point about the sports pitches and on-site being the preference, entirely right, Councillor. When we get that detailed programme, the relevant reserve matters applications, we will assess it against our local plan policy, and that local plan policy, again, is very clear that on-site provision is the starting point. It's only where it's clearly demonstrably shown that that is not possible that we look at alternative options. What we have the benefit of here is that we have done robust assessments to this application that shows in principle, yes, you can do it on-site. So we would clearly need some very different evidence put to us as to why that's not the case. So our starting point will be on site. In terms of Stamford Tennis Club, similar situation again. The requirement is for that 3.13 hectares of outdoor sports space to meet the needs of the development itself. Unfortunately, that definition within the local plan policy doesn't then delineate between whether it's football pitches, tennis courts, etc. It's all-encompassing. We'd hope as much as anyone that that provision on site includes new tennis facilities as well. And as we say, if that on site provision isn't provided, that's where we then refer to financial contributions off site. One option may be for the tennis club's existing sites to upgrade that if we cannot provide sufficient space on site for that sports need.
Thank you. So Basically, yes, that's all going to be taken into account.
Thank you, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Yes, we've obviously all discussed quite a range of issues this afternoon, and we've heard quite a number of sort of speakers as well. But we can only consider refusal if there is a material planning consideration that we're concerned about. Of everything that's been discussed, which of the issues would be regarded as a material planning consideration, as a realistic sort of issue? Because obviously there's a lot of issues, but sifting through all those issues, which of those would we consider to be a significant material consideration? Thank you.
All of the points that we've discussed today, Councillor Bird, in terms of access impacts, open space provision, the noise lighting impacts associated with the removal of bund, all material planning considerations, is simply a case of the evidence presented to us and the evidence in front of you is that all of those issues can be satisfactorily addressed. So all relevant considerations, but all the evidence shows it can meet those policy requirements, and therefore the recommendation in front of you is to grant planning permission.
Just to add to that, it's about balance and about whether or not the concerns we have are outweighed by the overall benefits of the application. That's quite a key point as well. So in that case, I'll just check that we have no more comments, no more questions. In that case, I would like to go to a vote. Yes, yes, I was just about to find it.
Would it be helpful if Adam read it all, I read it all?
Yeah, I can cover that for you, Chair.
Got it here.
So the rest, do you want me to?
Yeah, I'm happy to read it. Yeah, that's fine. I found it, thank you. It's on page 82. So the recommendation that we'll be voting on is to authorise the Assistant Director Planning and Growth to refer the application to the Secretary of State with a resolution to grant planning permission subject to the conditions, completion of a Section 106 agreement and joint infrastructure planning agreement. And in the event that the Secretary of State does not call in the application, the Assistant Director Planning and Growth is authorised to grant planning permission subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement and joint infrastructure planning agreement. Do we need to add any more wording relating to the highways?
I think, Councillor Morgan, we'll just have to reflect, for clarity of the committee and anybody sat in the public gallery or watching at home, that Section 106 includes the list of items on page 140 through to 142 of the papers, and also in relation to the joint infrastructure planning agreement on page 143 of the papers, plus a two-thirds of the ask from county highways in relation to the junction improvements, traffic orders, upgrades to the crossings, and also the informative in relation to the advice from fire and rescue that needs to be taken into account in reserve matters application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On that basis,
that's correct.
Thank you. So all those in favour, if you can please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's unanimous. Unanimous. That is unanimous. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We'll need to have a vote for an extension because we've just come up to 3 hours. It's currently 4:30. So if I dare suggest up to 5 o'clock which might cover the whole rest of the agenda depending. Are people happy with that? If we go up to 5 o'clock, we can't go beyond 5 o'clock. Thank you, thank you. That was passed, thank you.
Oh.
So we're now moving to agenda item 9, which is on page 201. This is application reference S220502. It is an outline application for residential development up to 650 dwellings. It's on land at Quarry Farm, Old Great North Road, Little Casterton in Rutland. And a point has been made before, SKDC is not the decision-making body. This is a Rutland Council decision. I'll now hand over to Adam Murray. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this is a response to an adjoining authority consultation for outline plan and permission for the Quarry Farm development. As you say, we are not the determining authority for this application, Rutland County Council is, and therefore the role of South Kesteven is to consider the impacts of the proposal in terms of our strategic interests, namely that relationship between the Quarry Farm proposal and the Stamford North application. The Quarry Farm site itself is 163 acres of land. It is situated between Casterton Road and Little Casterton Road, and it's a former brickworks and clay and stone quarry pit which includes mature and scrub woodland and grassland, and the central and eastern parts of the site, including that woodland and scrubland, have been identified as a candidate local wildlife centre that meets the criteria for designation because of the large area of mixed grassland habitats and several rare plant species. As we've discussed, the site was previously identified as part of the cross-boundary allocation to the north of Stamford in conjunction with the land to the east within South Kesteven, but the Rutland local plan was withdrawn before examination, so Quarry Farm does not currently have allocation status, albeit it's identified as a draft allocation in the new Rutland local plan. The application is entirely within Rutland County Council, so they're the determining authority, but we have previously provided a comment to the application in relation to the impacts on the Stamford North development. That previous consultee response was that there was no objection to the principle of development, but there were significant reservations about the absence of information and legal agreements related to a number of matters, including the impact on the A1 and the local highways network, the absence of a site-wide master plan, insufficient evidence that the proposals would compensate for the loss of the candidate wildlife centre, the absence of a legal agreement for affordable housing, and the absence of a legal agreement to make sure that the scheme provides proportionate contributions towards mitigating the impact of the Stamford North development as a whole. Members voted to endorse that response and reserved the right to request that the Secretary of State calls the application in for determination if Rutland County Council resolved to approve the application before those issues were addressed. Now, as we've heard, since that previous debate, the Stamford North application has been received and has been presented to committee, and the applicants for Quarry Farm and Stamford North have produced a joint comprehensive master plan demonstrating how the two sites can work in a coordinated manner, and that's included the submission of the Main Street design brief looking specifically at the East-West Link Road and how particularly the point of access onto Little Casterton Road, that interface, could be coordinated. The joint infrastructure planning agreement has been progressed between the landowners and the two planning authorities to secure the delivery of the link road and make sure that there is a coordinated design approach. Alongside that, there's been a revised master plan and landscape environmental master plan submitted to Rutland County Council, which has looked to address concerns raised about ecological impacts, and that's included an updated biodiversity net gain assessment. And one thing to note in relation to that is Rutland County Council's ecological advisors have withdrawn their previous objection on the application. In terms of the actual evaluation of the proposal in front of you, that updated assessment is set out in full. Again, there's no objection to the principle of development on the site because the proposals form part of that wider Stamford North development and make provision for part of that east-west link road, which is needed to facilitate both Quarry Farm and the Stamford North development. As we've mentioned, the results of the modelling have determined the phasing of the link road. And the joint infrastructure planning agreement is drafted in a way to make sure that the link road is completed in full prior to occupation of 300 dwellings at Quarry Farm, or 500 dwellings at Stamford North, whichever is the sooner, or no later than 8 years following the commencement of either of the developments. The actual way that the joint infrastructure agreement is to be drafted ensures that that link road is completed regardless of the status of progress of either site. So if only Stamford North was progressed, that link road has to be completed in full. In terms of the issues raised through the current consultee response, the draft response includes a reference for the joint infrastructure planning agreement to be signed and completed, and also makes an appropriate request to financial contributions to expanding the bus services as part of the public transport strategy. And again, as we've just discussed through the debate on the Stamford North application, it would be reasonable to update that section to also make request for Rutland County Council to make their fair contribution to those upgrades on Sydney Farm Lane, Arran Road and Rutland Road. In terms of that revised response in full, on the screen in front of you is the summary of those key points. So as discussed during the Stamford North application, we've got Grampian conditions that we have requested to be replicated on both permissions relating to the implementation and suitable phasing of foul water and clean water drainage. We are satisfied that subject to those conditions in terms of financial contributions to public transport and to those upgrades to the local highway network, that doesn't result in any unacceptable impacts. And then there's issues raised previously in terms of affordable housing, as set out within your committee report. Ultimately, that is a decision for Rutland County Council to make as the planning authority. We cannot advise refusal on that basis, but we are making it clear within the suggested response that our view is that this development is Stamford facing, and therefore the affordable housing should be made available to meet the Stamford needs. In terms of infrastructure, as I say, whilst Rutland County Council have said that the infrastructure needs of Quarry Farm can be fulfilled within their boundary entirely, and that's the way that they would intend to look at spending their SIL receipts, our view is that we do not think that necessarily represents good planning and looking at holistically how the development would function, and therefore there is a suggested reference within the response of highlighting our concern with that and encouraging them to continue to engage to look at allocating those funds in an appropriate manner, including, as we say, those contributions to the highways contributions that will be secured through Stamford North as well. So ultimately the recommendation to committee is to endorse that draft revised response to Rutland County Council and delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning and Growth in consultation with the portfolio holder to issue that updated response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. We do have some speakers on this item. First of all, if I can call Councillor Richard Cleaver, if you'd like to come forward, please. And as before, you'll have 3 minutes and a 30-second warning. Thank you.
Thank you. So, just for the benefit of the record, my name is Richard Cleaver, and I am a Lincolnshire County Council for Stamford West and the South Kesteven District Councillor for Stamford St John's Ward. The officer report on this item states simply and starkly, quote, Rutland County Council have refused to enter into any agreement to allow funds collected by RCC under the SIL charging schedule to be used to fund infrastructure within South Kesteven. I'm told RCC stands to receive around £7 million in SIL contributions from the developer at Quarry Farm, but it refuses to accept that any of the affordable housing on Quarry Farm should be allocated to help meet the housing needs of Stamford, to which it is, by definition, an urban extension. The planning inspector's report on our SK local plan stated, quote, consequently, a development of 650 homes at Quarry Farm in Rutland is seen as part of meeting South Kesteven's housing need. RCC needs also to contribute, as we know from your previous decision this afternoon, it needs to contribute to mitigations needed to our LCC's roads, which will take additional traffic from Quarry Farm. It also refuses to part-fund the new primary school, which will be immediately next to Quarry Farm, as again you've seen earlier today, insisting that Quarry Farm children must travel instead to Ryle or to Great Casterton, adding, of course, to traffic, and meaning that the primary school might only be a one-form entry instead of two-form entry. It also refuses to contribute to a single joint solution for NHS capacity, GP capacity issues, which arise across both sides of the county boundary. In short, it is clear to me that RCC wishes to take the £7 million estimated SIL contribution and spend as much of it as it can on political priorities elsewhere in its county. This is not acceptable, and I therefore ask the committee not to lift the holding objection until the matters I've just referred to have been resolved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? No? Thank you very much. I'd now like to call Kesteven to come forward, please. Chris is representing Community Campaign Group Protect Quarry Farm. When you're ready, if you would like to let us know.
Hello everyone. On behalf of the campaign group Protect Quarry Farm, I would like to object to SKDC's revised position to lift their holding objection due to the conditions attached to the original objection not being met, particularly in relation to road safety, congestion and the negative impact of development on Stamford's under-pressure services and infrastructure. Point 1, traffic. The recent modelling itself, which highways have accepted, state that 6 junctions within Stamford will be operating over capacity by 2041, even without development taking place. These junctions are key junctions that are critical to the effective traffic flow around Stamford. The accepted logic by our authorities seems to be, well, the overcapacity junctions are bad, but they're only a bit worse than what they would have been anyway, so we can't possibly ask the developer to pay more. Well, that logic is absolutely not acceptable to Stamford residents. We have an acknowledged problem with no credible solutions. And our own independent traffic consultant, Bruce Bamber, who produced a 40-page report questioning the modelling and its outcomes, states that the impact on critical junctions has likely been underestimated. He states, when a junction approaches capacity, it becomes highly sensitive to even small changes in traffic flows, since additional traffic joins the end of existing queues and leads to large increases in delays. This is nowhere more evident than the highly sensitive A1-A606 junction, which is becoming increasingly more hazardous and represents, according to this report, a severe adverse highways safety impact. Given the current appalling accident rate on the A1, the lack of any proposed measures to mitigate risks on these critical junctions and slip roads, as well as the acknowledged problems with local congestion, are SKDC really willing to lift this objection? Point 2, lack of financial contributions. It is astounding to most residents that after just one meeting of the Joint Strategic Planning Board, SKDC have simply surrendered their negotiating position on the insistence of developer contributions. This is not just disappointing, it is unacceptable.
The net costs of development on Stamford far exceed any potential benefits. SKDC can't count the housing targets, despite the development being part of Stamford's built-up area. Worse still, we're extremely unlikely, based on Rutland's current negotiating position, to get any of the affordable or social housing allocation, which, by the way, was part of the original holding objection. In addition, Stamford has to absorb the additional strain on its schools, on its healthcare services and on its roads, with currently nothing in return. There is not even a jointly agreed local authority master plan, which is happening illustratively. The best that can be offered is a draft development brief that hasn't even been subject to public consultation or member agreement. Can SKDC really pass this, given these faults? The truth be told, the only reason this is being considered is because of the strategic importance of the link road. And by agreeing to this draft position, SKDC are compromising the best interests of the town, as well as the environmental integrity of the wildlife site itself, for the sake of rushing through a flawed Stamford North application. It is not good enough, and the people of Stamford deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. Please don't run off yet. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Like to raise? No. Thank you. Thank you. I now move forward to questions of our officer and debate. Would anybody like to speak at this point? No? In that case, I'll start the ball rolling. Forgive me for being confused, but looking at the report on page 250, we have their conclusions, and on 8.2, we have a very strong list of concerns which have been echoed by our speakers, which do not appear to have been addressed. So I am, forgive me for being confused, that on page 204, we seem to be, under the executive summary, not supporting that position. Can somebody explain to me why that is?
Yes, I can walk you through that, Councillor. So, the first point on there related to insufficient evidence of the impact on the A1 and the local highways network. Now, as you've heard through the debate on the Stamford North application, since we made that previous holding objection, we have had the updated Stamford model run and the outputs of that. We've then got formal consultee responses from both Lincolnshire County Council as the local highways authority for Lincolnshire and National Highways, who are the strategic highways authority dealing with the A1, both of whom have lifted their holding position and confirmed that they have no objections to the two applications. So that has effectively addressed that first point. The second point related to an agreed master plan for the development and looking particularly at that coordination of the spine road. And as we've discussed and presented, there has now been a joint master plan submitted by the developers showing how that can be accommodated. And we have a Main Street design brief that has been published as part of the application, which again looks at the design principles for that link road. The third point relates to the impact on the candidate local wildlife site. That is a site-specific ecological impact, and ultimately that is a matter for Rutland County Council to take into account as the determining authority and weigh up the harms and benefits of the overall application. We have expressed on record our concern with that, but as I have said, Rutland County Council's own ecology consultee on the Quarry Farm application has now removed their objection and stated that they are satisfied subject to conditions. The third point relates to the legal agreement for affordable housing. Again, as I mentioned during the presentation, that is ultimately a decision for Rutland County Council to make as the planning authority for Quarry Farm. We can express, and as we have done through the suggested consultee response, that our view is it is Stamford facing, but ultimately we cannot compel Rutland to do that. We can make our position known, but they are the planning authority and the responsible authority for that, and will make that decision. And likewise, the requirement for the proportionate contributions to infrastructure, as we say, ultimately we have put in the consultee response our point of view that we think they should be making proportionate contributions. Ultimately, though, they are a SIL charging authority. It would need them to exempt the site from SIL to enter into a joint agreement. We have encouraged them to do that. They have not done so. But ultimately, what they do with that SIL funds is down to them. We cannot compel them. We do not have the powers to compel them to spend that money. We can put on record our desire and a request for them to make those proportionate contributions, but we do not have powers to actually force them to do that. And that is the way in which the consultee response is, the suggested revised response is drafted. We have put conditions on for what we want to see to make sure those strategic issues are addressed. We have highlighted our concerns with certain aspects, but recognises the fact that ultimately there is only so far we can go with this as a consultee to the process, because we are not the planning authority.
Thank you for that explanation, a comprehensive explanation. Does Councillor Bishnell-Singh, first of all?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Adam, for your presentation. Adam, would you please clarify something for me? I take it the 650 houses that are located and going to be built on the site, they will be connecting to our infrastructure, i.e. the water and the sewage systems. So will that, because despite the fact that Anglian Water are saying they have got low capacity to do that. So, and then what you're saying that linked by Rutland County Council will not be contributing anything to that, so all the cost will be on our side.
If we take the point specifically about the drainage and Anglian Water and the clean and foul water drainage, that is a matter that is being addressed through the applications, and the developers themselves are having to do that. So for the Stamford North application, you'll recall that there's conditions on there that required phasing plans and no occupation until suitable mitigation is provided for clean water and foul water. What the suggested response to the Quarry Farm application requests is that those conditions are replicated for any permission granted on Quarry Farm, so they too have to provide suitable provision on site to tie into that identified programme.
Thank you.
How likely are we to get that from, judging what you have been communicating with Rutland, with the officers there, are we likely to get that or not?
The way that the suggested consultee response is drafted is on the basis of no objections subject to those conditions being included. If those conditions are not replicated, then ultimately us as the council will then have an objection to that application.
Thank you. Councillor Fellows.
Because of these circumstances, particularly in the light of what Councillor Cleaver was saying, is there any way we can refer this matter to the Secretary of State, or we can vote on that? Because unless RCC come to some agreement with us, and it does not look like we have the position to make them, can we not some way make their basically unreasonable position be questioned?
If it's okay, I can answer this. Firstly, I don't think it's fair to say that Rutland are unreasonable, because we've not reached crunch point where they've refused to share any of their SIL contributions. What I can say is that there is a joint strategic board. That board's actually been in place for a number of years. In various forms, and it's been there to discuss various matters, because this site's not a new site. It's a site that is in our local plan. It was proposed to be in the Rutland local plan before it was withdrawn at the last minute. So there's been lots of dialogue over the years between both councils, and lots of positive and good dialogue. What we've got is a difficulty that we have Section 106 and Rutland have SIL. SIL have not exempted this site from SIL, so they've got to use that method. And what we also have is a statement of common ground between the two councils that this council signed up to, whereby we will continue that positive dialogue. In terms of your specific question about referral to the Secretary of State, anybody can write to their MP or to the Secretary of State for MHCLG and request that the application, any planning application, is called in, and it would be down to the Secretary of State to make a decision on that. What they normally do is they impose a holding direction on the council whilst they consider whether they want to call that application in. we can't require the Secretary of State to do that, but anybody could write to the Secretary of State and request that the application is called in. The difficulty you've got is a lot of these issues with the SIL contributions are post-decision, because Rutland will get the infrastructure, will get the funding, and then they will have to make a decision as to how that's distributed in accordance with their SIL lists, which are basically a list of all the infrastructure that they will propose to spend that money on. So it's a really difficult and challenging situation that we face, but I would say it's unfair to say that it's not good dialogue we're having between the two councils. We are having lots of dialogue. Thanks.
You may not be able to answer it or want to answer it, Emma, but could you see any benefit in SKDC actually referring it as a body to the Secretary of State?
I'm not entirely sure the Secretary of State would be able to do anything differently, because if it was referred to the Secretary of State, then they would determine the application. They can't, I don't believe, any more than we can require Rutland or issue a decision subject to 106. I think they'd have to still do it in line with the, I'm looking at our solicitor, I think they'd still have to issue, and it would still be subject to SIL. What you're really asking is for somebody to intervene in Rutland's SIL decision-making process, and I'm not entirely sure that there's anything we can do or the Secretary of State would do by calling it in, but I'll just defer to the solicitor if that's okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Basically, Emma, yeah, there's nothing you can do about the fact that it's already in that SIL world rather than a Section 106 world, for want of a better description. And if the Secretary of State determined it, those positions would still be the same. It's unfortunate.
Councillor Bird.
Thank you. Given the difficult position we're in and that it's a Rutland development, what's the worst that can happen for us if we don't lift this? Thank you.
Ultimately, if planning permission isn't granted on Quarry Farm, then the Stamford North development cannot go ahead. The resolution that committee have just made is for that joint infrastructure planning agreement to be signed. That can only be signed and completed if you're granting permission on both sides of it. The Stamford North side of the application needs the completion of that full link road, including the part that goes through Quarry Farm.
Yes, Emma's just going to come back. I'm just going to remind people we only have about 3 minutes left before 5 o'clock as well, so we need to be very expedient.
I think the other point to make is we are a consultee to Rutland on this particular application. They'll have to have regard to that advice, and they will have to take into account our comments in their decision-making process, but simply because we've objected does not necessarily mean that they will refuse the application. So Adam set out the consequences of Rutland refusing the application, but us objecting doesn't automatically lead to an objection. And I just wanted to clarify something around the Anglian Water. Rutland County Council would also have consulted Anglian Water on their scheme, and they will have presumably have had the same sort of set of comments. So not only we will have to, we're saying them and reaffirming that position, but actually Anglian Water will be saying that to Rutland as well, about making sure there's adequate provision for foul and surface water. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Bishop. I just, what strikes me, I think we're being ever so polite. I think we're being too polite. I do, I mean, in particular, if we look at the housing situation, affordable housing, I think our statement could do with some of the robustness and gusto of Councillor Cleaver's comments, and because this is so important. It is so important. Can we, accepting the principle and the position we're in, could we revisit our wording on this so that we express more strongly how we feel about this?
I mean, ultimately, yes, committee, we can re-look at the wording. The only point I would stress again, though, is we're not the determining authority. Rutland may look to take the Quarry Farm application to a committee in the not too distant future. So it is something we do not have an entirety of time to make an updated response if members wish to look at some revised wording.
Sorry, can you say that again? My apologies.
It's just that, as I say, it is possible that Rutland may look to take a decision on the application. If, for example, Chair, if members wanted to defer consideration of this to allow a revised response to be drafted, we can do that. That's within the gift of the committee. Just to be mindful, there are time pressures to this. Rutland may look to take something to committee for Quarry Farm, potentially before we have a chance to refer this back to committee again.
Does it have to come back to committee, though, if we can make some amendments now?
So perhaps I can help. Obviously, the response in full would be the earlier parts of the report, and of course, in bold are some of the bits where we do express some disappointment, and certainly we draw your attention to paragraph 3.7.7 on page 212, where it says we respectfully reaffirm the position that the affordable housing, slightly abridged, should be part of the wider development and should be subject to an allocation nomination agreement prioritising the needs of Stamford residents and all those with a local connection to Stamford in the first instance. I don't know if that's a strong enough language for the committee. If you wanted something a little bit stronger, I think as long as we've got the sentiment, then perhaps the committee could delegate to myself and either the portfolio holder or myself and the chairman to agree that final wording, as long as we've got a clear list of those points that you want us to cover.
Thank you. I think the report covers the key bits. It's just the, as I said, we are just so terribly polite about them, and I think we really do need to put our strength of feeling across. So, may I suggest then, if I put the proposal forward, that Emma and I as chair take this away and we come up with an alternative form of wording that expresses our position. Councillor Bellamy? Harris?
Well, Madam Chairman, I think we have to, if they don't want to play ball, I think we have to play hard ball. We have to change the strongest possible term we can put it to them.
That's what we're saying.
We don't want to bend backwards for far too long. For that.
Yeah, thank you. That is what we're saying. Councillor Bellamy? Councillor Fellows?
I might be stating the obvious, but obviously this would include the S106 roads issue we've just been talking about as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Fellows?
Can I second your proposal, Chair?
Thank you so much. May I have a vote on this? Those in favour, please raise your hands. That we, just to clarify, we will be... Would you like to?
So the suggestion is that the final response could be delegated to myself to issue following consultation with the chairman of the planning committee. Chairman of the planning committee. What I would suggest is that we just clarify that it's lifting some of the bits that are in bold in the paper, where we talk about things like affordable housing. It's obviously adding the section 106 element in terms of the contributions, and it's those elements, and just making sure that's reflected more strongly in, I guess, the summary or or maybe even the first point to Rutland in terms of that sort of firm statement. What I don't want to do is go away, draft it on those lines, and then somebody think, actually, we needed to add something else. So I just want a bit of comfort that it's those points that are already in that report. We're just firming up and making a little bit stronger the actual conclusion. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Bellamy.
I mean, obviously this has got to go fairly quickly, but could you just share it with us after?
Happy to, yes. We'll draft something to go out to members for your final review. Thank you.
Can I just ask, we're actually saying we have no objection subject to this. I think previously we said we did object, subject to. So, unless this and that and the other was done, could we not word it in a similar vein?
Absolutely. If the committee felt that that was a stronger message, that it was no objection subject to these, then absolutely we can do that.
Yes, I believe that's the case. We would include that in the proposal. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, so sorry.
I know we voted for that, but I just feel very strongly that we're just rolling over and letting them do exactly what they want. And it's Stamford Town that's going to really suffer from this. So we really need to be really assertive, really strong, and get them to understand that. But I just feel as if we're just giving in to them all the time. I'm sorry.
No, thank you for your comment. I think, and that's really the purpose of us revisiting this, to express that. I think the point was, well made. This development is on the edge of Stamford. Let's face it. And Stamford will have the benefits, but also all of the impacts from this development.
But they need to share. They need to share.
Yeah,
because
it's not
they're
fair,
getting the development, and they'll still get things in their county. But we're the ones that will suffer. SK will suffer, and Stamford especially will suffer. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. That's why I voted for it. Very strong, very assertive.
We will share, as we said, we will share the wording with the committee members. So your contributions will be welcome. Thank you very much. This ends now the main body of the committee meeting. There was a KPI report, which was agenda item 4 before you. This was just for noting. We are at 5 o'clock now, so I was going to suggest, if you want to read that, if you have any comments, Councillor Fellow.
I almost don't want to do this because it seems like I am rushing and not giving its due diligence to it, but I have read it and I can't imagine that there'll be any great objections or questions about it. So I would like to propose that we accept this report. If someone seconds it, we can vote on it.
Councillor Bishnaz Singh, thank you so much. I'd just like to comment on thanking the officers for the work that they've done, both in planning and enforcement, and making great progress, so thank you. And thank you to all of our guests for coming. We do. So all those in favour, please raise your hands.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah.
That's unanimous. We will now close the meeting.